The story begins with the main character thinking that he should work, he should study, he should eat. He has so many things he needs to do. However, there are no fewer things it does. He wants to play games. He wants to travel. He wants to have fun with friends. He wants to go on dates. Why can a person only do one thing at a time? That's why he always wanted to have two bodies. And then he had two bodies. Somewhere in the city, a lot of people have gathered on the city street and are waiting for something. One guy says he's finally going to start a revival. It seems that he will get a great skill. The second guy chuckles and says he could use a skill that increases intelligence. The other guy is standing not far away from them and thinks it's very tiring. He looks around and thinks that he wants to go. This guy's name is Young Sang-woo. He's a student at John Geok University. He exhales and says that he would like to have two bodies. A man in a suit holds a microphone in his hand, coughs, and asks everyone present for a minute of attention. This man is in a class hunter. Parkwanta. He says he's glad to see them. He gives his name and says that he will be in charge of the 10th Portal Awakening Program. The Awakening Program is a program launched by the government to help you awaken your abilities. To do this, people are forced to cross the portal. Wanta points to the side and says that he sincerely hopes that their townspeople will successfully complete their awakening. They will start right now. The first group should go ahead. Sometime later, several people together with Sanwoo walk towards him one after the other in two rows. He is a little worried about what is happening and wonders, is it almost his turn? A girl walks up to him, greets him, and asks if he's from group 37, number 7, Young Sang-woo, right? He agrees and says that it is him. The girl points the device at his wristband and tells him that he should let her check his identity. After checking this, she points to the portal and says that she has confirmed the information about it. He must hand them all the devices and enter the basement in front of him. Sunwoo starts walking towards this portal, which emits a blue glow. He stopped in front of this portal and just stares at it for a few seconds. He is very worried about what is happening and looks at it with surprise. He gathered his strength and started to enter the portal. The system notifies that user identification is starting. User Young Sang-woo has been assigned his personal identification code. Identification is complete. Rights to use the system are granted. Registration was completed. After a short period of time, Sunwoo opens her eyes after moving through the portal. He clutches his head and wonders if he's lost consciousness. It feels like his head is going to burst. He notices a lot of people around him, drones flying everywhere, and someone asks, "Are they in the bunker?" Sang-woo looks around and thinks that it looks like he's not the only one feeling bad. The girl who was in this place created a bird from the flame. She was surprised by this, and she loudly says that she received an amazing ability. She removes this bird. Several men in suits approach her, who hand her their business cards and ask her to join the guild. Sang-woo looks at her and says in a low voice that he envies her. A guy came up to him, wished him a good day, and said that he was congratulating him on does he feel well. Sang-woo gets up and says that he doesn't feel very good. The man says that it will pass soon. Did he check the skill he got? Sunwoo sighs at him and says he's going to do it now. He raised his hand and a large system window immediately appeared in front of him. Strength 27 points, Reflexes to 1510 points, Health 643 points, Endurance to 1539 points, Monozoid 130 points, Skills Active Skill First Level Cloning Passive Skill Strengthening First Level Clones. Sang-woo looks at the system window in surprise and says that he only had to think about it, and it immediately appeared. He looks at his very small stat points and says he's just pathetic. He has come to terms with it and says that what is more important is what skill he got. The system notifies that the active skill is first level cloning. Creates a clone that looks like a user using energy. The maximum number of clones depends on the user's level. It will be linked to clones. The number of clones available to summon at a time is 1, and the cooldown time is 20 Fu. Sunwoo reads what is written in this system window intently and asks, can he summon clones? He wonders if there are no conditions for using this skill. Does this mean that he can use it for everyday activities? A guy comes up to him and says with a smile that apparently he has already finished checking his status window. Sang-woo agrees with him and says it's not all that good. The guy keeps smiling and says that he shouldn't be upset. All beginners have rather weak initial indicators. Can he learn his skill? Sunwoo decided not to hide it and says that he got the clone skill. The guy was confused when he heard this, repeated after him, and laughed. Sangwoo looks at him blankly and asks, "Is this really that bad?" The guy says that there was a person with the illusory cloning skill, but since his clones didn't have a physical shell, they couldn't do anything. Sangwoo doesn't say anything and thinks that however his clones are, it's not an illusion. The guy says that however, it's better than waking up without any skills at all. If he demonstrated his skill to the officials here, they would be able to assess it more accurately. Sunwoo turns around and sees a crowd of people looking at the guy who is creating a very strong pillar of energy. This guy screams very loudly while using his skill, and his hand turns to stone. People keep looking at it, and some of them write something down in their notebooks. Sangwoo was depressed because of the skill this guy had obtained. He turns around and says he doesn't need it. Where is the exit from here? The guy asks if he's seen the research team. They must pass the final scan and registration, and only then will they be able to return through the portal. A guy from the research group looks at his laptop screen and asks the next participant to come over, and Sangwoo immediately logged into the scanning device. When the scan has been completed, he exits this device and sighs in displeasure. The guy greeted him and asked, "His skill is cloning, right?" Sangwoo agrees and says that he said it right, and says that the probability of showing one or more skills is 73 degrees. Identification was completed. The cloning skill is registered. The awakened one's registration form was sent to the ID bracelet. After some time on public transport, Sangwoo looks at his bracelet and thinks that it's over faster than he thought. So what is this cloning skill? After some more time, he goes to his house and asks if they did a good job. He sees on his multi-monitor computer, which he left turned on. Sunwoo walks over to her computer, and a game was turned on one of the screens. He sits down in his chair and says that now he will see what has changed. He looks at his in-game character's inventory and says it's trash. The system notifies that he has an iron shield, protection 15 points, strength 30 points, class normal. Sunwoo lies down on the bed and says he's not interested. He looks away and thinks that the popularity of games today is still falling. Maybe he should hope for a day off. He has to pay for tuition and rent. He needs to find a part-time job. He wished there was someone else working for him. He stands up abruptly, remembers the skill, and says that he has a clone. Sangwoo stands in the middle of his room and says he needs to check it out. He closed his eyes to concentrate, and a bright blue energy appeared around him. He opens his eyes abruptly and thinks about summoning a clone. After that, streams of energy begin to escape from his body, and this greatly surprised him. While Sang's mind is flooded with energy, and he screams loudly in surprise. His energy begins to concentrate a few meters away from him, and he stares at it intently. When he finished using his skill, a clone of him with no clothes appeared next to him. Sangwoo was surprised at what happened, and silently looks on. He looks at his clone blankly, and tries to think of something to say. He asks, "So is he a clone of him?" His clone looks at him and agrees. Sangwoo asks if he can touch it. The clone agrees with the creator. He looks at this clone and thinks it's very awkward. He slaps himself in the face and thinks he should come to his senses. Then he puts his hand on the clone's shoulder. He was surprised because of this and thinks that this is a real physical body and not an illusion. Sangwoo continues to examine the clone's body and notices that he is not wearing any clothes at all. He's a little embarrassed about it and says he should wear something first. Sunwoo found a pair of pants and a sweatshirt in his room that he can give to the clone. He asks, so he just has to give him orders. The clone puts on the things they gave him and agrees to it. Sangwoo thinks he should sit down first. As soon as he thought about it, the clone immediately did so. He's surprised by this and asks, so he doesn't even need to say the orders out loud. He mentally orders the clone to stand up and then immediately does so. He mentally orders the clone to repeat it, and it immediately does so. His clone was very tired due to these squats and started to breathe heavily due to fatigue. Sunwoo looks at this and thinks that it looks like clones have the same stamina as him. His attention was drawn to the fact that notifications began to arrive on his phone. He takes out his phone from his pocket and asks, "Is this Gendo?" As he stares at his phone, his clone continues to crouch next to him and breathes very heavily due to fatigue. Does the KKD user tell them what skill they got? He has to hunter skills. That's cool. isn't it? What did he get? He should respond to it faster. Was he asleep? The clone continues to squat with loud noises as Sangwoo responds to the person who texted him. He says he doesn't know how to say. KKD asks what he means by that. Did something bad happen? He needed to be more active, like his characters in games, so that he could get a better skill. Sangwoo is embarrassed about being texted and thinks he talks too much. The system notifies you that your stamina has increased from 0 to 1 points. At the same time, on the roof stands George Lucas with the profession of a jumper. He is the owner of the Flicker skill, an S-class ranker in America, and also the leader of the Enlightenment group, the first person to pass Tower 1, which previously no one could conquer. After some time in the main building of Enlightenment, the girl says that at the moment, according to the analysis of the population in Tristo of millions of people, 80 degrees are awakened. George Lucas asks, then how long will it take to wake up 100 degrees? The girl looks at her tablet and says that given the number of participants in the wake-up program each year, they can expect this for 5 years. George Lucas keeps looking out the window and says 5 years isn't that long. Some time later, Sunwoo has lost weight during this time. He runs outside and breathes heavily due to fatigue. He continues to run, despite being very tired, and his face is flushed. The guys who are sitting on the bench look at him and say that this guy is still running today. He noticed that he was here every day. What if he fainted if he ran around in those clothes? Sunwoo is sitting on a bench and breathing heavily from running. Someone came up to him and handed him a bottle of water. The old lady says with a smile that he is working hard here again. He should have a drink before another round. Sangwoo doesn't say anything and continues to sit in his seat. He abruptly got up and ran away in the other direction from her, which greatly surprised the old lady. She looks at him blankly and wonders if he's an introvert. She looks at Sangwoo running away from her in the other direction. Some time later, he stands on the scale and it shows that his weight is 78 kilograms. He looks at it and thinks that he's been feeling hungry lately, so he eats for 2. But he still lost 9 kilos this month. He doesn't do anything and his body gets better day by day. Besides, he seems to have grown up a bit. The system notifies that his health, stamina, and reflexes have increased by 0.1 points. Sunwoo looks at these system windows and thinks that he was told the truth, that skills come from a person's hidden desires. He sat down in his chair and thinks that he found out something while using the clones. First, the pain and fatigue experienced by the clone is not transmitted to it. Second, the clone simply disappears if it takes damage or spends energy above the limit. Third, with each change in his body, the clone copies his appearance. Fourth, even though he is far away, orders can still be transmitted through thoughts. He once ordered him to stop running and start doing push-ups. The clone immediately began executing this order, which surprised the people around him. The fifth thing he learned was that a clone can't create clones. Sunwoo thinks that if he could, there would be countless clones, so it's impossible. Some time ago, he's writing something on his bed. A website for hunters appears on his screen, and he reads what is written there. Sangwoo looks at this and thinks that he didn't expect this day to come. This is the day when he will study the hunter site. What are the characteristics? Characteristic per unit. This is the limit for an unawakened adult. There are ordinary characteristics and special characteristics, but most awakened ones have only ordinary ones. Regeneration, resilience, mentality, and the like are special characteristics, so the way to open it is, with a few exceptions, unknown. It's hard to raise the standard stats even by 1 point per day. At this moment, Sunwoo looks at the system window where his stats are written. Strength improved to 0, 707 points. Reflexes improved to 0, 515 points. Health improved to 0, 659 points. Stamina improved to 0, 550 points. Mana also remained at SWA 130 points. Both of his skills remained at the first level. Sunwoo looks at this with a smile and thinks that since the clone trains non-stop and does everything possible to fulfill the given order, it is constantly on the move until it reaches the limit. Thanks to this, he was able to increase his stats so quickly. Does this mean that he could double the points he got if he moved with the clone? But he could hardly have endured such a harsh training session. He took a flyer on which a harsh gym, which says he lives the same as yesterday. Health, personal trainer, muscle building, full range of exercises. Polities, a 6-day program, a today program, and a program for professionals. Physical education, a 6-day program, a today program, and a program for professionals. Seung-woo reads this, raises his head, and looks at the monitor screen. On this screen, several windows are open with the game for different characters. He smiles and says that it means he will be the head, and the clone will be the limbs. Sometime later, and it says that his balance is 123,801. 45,001 one-time payment, 35,001 one-time payment. Quan Quinn Medical Clinic, 12,001 one-time payment. Courtroom, 451 one-time payment. Sunwoo looks at this and says that there is not enough money to pay for registration. He sighs and thinks that he spent a lot of money on food. He would need to find a part-time job, since things are going badly in the workshop right now. He starts writing something on his keyboard. Sang-woo looks at the monitor screen and thinks that he needs to find some construction work. This will help him train his body and earn money at the same time. It directs the cursor to offers with different jobs and phone numbers attached. Sang-woo looks at this and thinks that it seems like he should do it on his own first. A clone can't succeed if it gives an order in an area it knows nothing about. He found something that caught his attention. The website says that the Vukan Logistics Center is looking for a part-time employee. Information about the work: it is tied to delivery and pickup. The work is simple. Conditions: schedule from 19 hours to 4 hours, including a break. Working days from Monday to Saturday. Sunday off. Workplace Seoul. Cancel. Payment per day 100,000 won. Cash payment. Sunwoo asks, "Isn't this perfect?" He immediately writes the phone number specified in the ad. The person answered his call. He says hello and says that he saw an ad for hiring employees on the site. The person who answered the call asks, "He's talking about working in delivery, right? There will be no preliminary interview, so they can come right in and start working." When can he start? Sang-woo says that he planned to start from tomorrow. The person asks if they can't start today. Sang-woo thinks about it and says it's possible. The person says that in this case, they will be waiting for him at the logistics center by 18 hours and 30 minutes. Sunwoo agrees to this and wonders if no one else works there. This is not so important because they pay normally there. After some time, at the necessary place that was indicated to him, Sang-woo stands next to her clan and says it seems to be here. He named this clone number 1. He looks at this clone and thinks that you can say that he is a twin, but something can go wrong. He tells the clone that he should respond well when he comes in. While he's working, his name is Jendo. The clone agrees with everything he tells him. Sang-woo looks to the side and thinks that whatever it is, the building is much bigger than he expected. Where should it go? Someone passing by recognizes him and asks if it's him, right? The man smiles happily at him and asks, "What is he doing here?" Sang-woo is surprised when he sees it and calls it Dokjul. They shake hands, and the man is surprised to say that he didn't even recognize him at first. He's lost a lot of weight. Sang-woo thanked him for this and says that he came here with a friend for a part-time job. Dokjul asks, "Is that what it means?" He points to the building and says that in this case, he should go there. There will be an office there. Sang-woo smiles and says that he is very lucky that they met. He is grateful to him. Dokjul agrees and says that he was also surprised when he saw him. They'll see you later. Sunwoo slapped his face hard with both hands. He looks at something and thinks he's very nervous about it all. He turns around and asks if he's worried. His clone tells him that he's not worried. Sang-woo smiles and says that he is basically right. He is now an awakened one. He walks towards the building that Dokjul pointed out to him and loudly says that they should finish up here quickly and then eat ramen at home. Some time later, Sang-woo lies crying and thinks that he was too arrogant about the delivery job. There is no end to this work at all. He watches as his clone and several other workers move boxes. Sunwoo is very tired from work and wonders if these people have some kind of heavy lifting skill. He looks at the clone who works together with Dokjul. He cries and thinks that he shouldn't have come here because the clone is doing just fine on his own. Someone loudly says that our long break has begun. Sunwoo is sitting against the wall next to his clone and is very sick from being tired. Someone hands them two cans of soda and says they can have it. Dokjul says that it is necessary to replenish the fluid in the body. They also need something to eat, so he brought them this. Sunwoo was surprised by this and thanked him. Dokjul sits down next to them and says that this young man worked hard and didn't say anything. What's his name? The clone says his name is Kim Jendo. Doxley says he has a manly enough name. By the way, how is he feeling? It looked like this was his first time doing this kind of work. Sang-woo agrees and says it's quite a tedious task. Doxley says that no matter what, they both have guts. Most of the kids had already run away. Sang-woo laughs tearfully and thinks that if it wasn't for the money, he would have been one of the ones who ran away. Doxley asks which university he goes to. Sang-woo says he goes to Jeonguk University. Doxil was surprised by this and says it's a great place, he must be a good student. While they talk, the clone sits and drinks the soda they gave him. Sunwoo says it's not such a good university. Doxil says he shouldn't be so humble, he would have given anything for his daughter to go there. Sangwoo says that he shouldn't worry so much about it. He didn't do very well in school either, but he still managed to get in. Doxil asks how he managed to get there if he wasn't good at his studies. Sunwoo says that he got a couple of licenses and a special permit. Dokjul was happy when he heard this and says that special permission is a way out of his situation. He thinks about something and sits in silence for a while, looking thoughtful. He looks up at him and asks, does he want to get another part-time job? Sunwoo asks, what part-time job is he talking about? Dokjul asks, instead of getting tired here, can he study with his daughter? Sunwoo was surprised by this and wanted to ask a question, but stopped. Does he wonder if he will have to take lessons with his daughter? He remembers how much money he has left on the balance sheet and how much he spends. He asks, should he improve her knowledge in all subjects? Dokjul agrees and says it's embarrassing for him to say that about his daughter, but is she really bad at school? Sunwoo asks how much will he pay for this. Dokjul says that he will pay 50,000 won for each to our class a couple of times a week. Sangwoo thinks that 50,000 won in 2 hours isn't too bad if you only consider the time cost. He agrees to this, they shake hands, and Dokjul thanks him for it. He starts to get up and says that after work, he will discuss it with his daughter and contact him afterwards. He still has the same number, right? Sunwoo agrees to this. He stands up, stretches his back, and thinks he's going to practice now. He hopes that everything will turn out well. The system notifies that his health has increased by 0 and 2 points. Stamina has increased by 0 and 1 points. Sangwoo smiles and says that he got the job and stat points. It's great. The guy rolled out to crates on a cart and says there's another one. Sangwoo notices him and tells him that he has something else to do. He looks into the bag and is going to eat before work, but doesn't say anything about it because of what he saw. He was surprised when he noticed that his bag was empty. He turns to the clone and notices that he's eating what was in that bag. Sangwoo looks at him with a very displeased expression and smiles. His clone continues to stuff all the food into his mouth. Sunwoo asks this freak, did he eat all the food at all? On the morning of the next day, he wakes up in his room on the bed in a very bad state. He says with a very displeased expression that it looks like he's about to die. He gets up and thinks that from now on, he will use number 1 for that part-time job. The system notifies that his stats are increasing, and he thinks that it looks like number 1 is still working. He mentally says that he can come back. Sangwoo thinks he wants to call him back and summon him again, but if he doesn't do it at home, he'll lose his clothes. First, he needs to eat. After that, he ate what he had prepared and left it on the table. He exhales happily and says he's full now. The sounds coming from the front door caught his attention. The clone enters his apartment and tells the creator that he is back. Sangwoo looks at him and says he should wash up and change his clothes. The clone immediately took a shower and changed his clothes, leaving the old one in the drawer with the other clothes. After that, the clone came out of the bathroom and stood in front of the creator. Sangwoo asks him to give him his hand. The clone immediately agreed and extended his hand. He holds the needle in his hand with a shaking hand and is very worried about something. He thinks number 1 is a clone. If it is withdrawn, it will be scattered to the wind. He is neither a human being nor a living being. He took the clone's hand and pierced his finger with this needle. The clone looks at him calmly and doesn't say anything about it. Sangwoo apologizes to him and asks if he's hurt. It's holding up well. He wipes the blood off the clone's finger and wonders when he will get the regeneration stat. He recently read on a hunter's website that regeneration is one of the few characteristics that is already known to be discovered. First, you need to make a wound on the body. Second, you need to allow this wound to heal naturally, without outside help. Third, you need to repeat this action until the Sunwoo wonders if this characteristic will show up if he does this for another month. He says that he is afraid to inflict a wound more than this. For now, it will just do it frequently. He turns around and tells the clone that he should eat ramen whenever he feels hungry, and then he needs to keep practicing. He hands him his extra phone for playing games and tells him that he should take this when he goes to work, and he definitely needs to answer the phone. He'll be out for now. Some time later, Sangwoo is walking down the street with a flyer and thinks that the gym should be in this direction. Suddenly, someone hugged him and called him by his first name, which surprised him very much. The strong guy tells him that they haven't seen each other for a long time. Sangwoo was surprised to see him and called him Kim Jendo. He takes his hand away and says he's hot, so he should leave him alone. Jendo says he wasn't sure if it was him, but he was still right. He's lost a lot of weight. Sunwoo shows the flyer and says that he started playing sports and is just going to the gym right now. Jendo asks, "Is this true? He's doing it too." Sangwoo agrees with him and says that he sees his muscles behind the layer of fat. Jendo says it's actually all muscle. Which gym does he go to? Sangwoo says that it calls a strong body and is located somewhere out there. Jendo recognizes this gym and says it's a good place. Sunwoo asks if this is true. He didn't see anything special there, except for the price. Jendo smiles very broadly and says that there is a very beautiful coach there. Sunwoo asks what he means by that. Jendo grabs him and says they should go there together. Sunwoo is embarrassed by this and says that he's not going there to practice. Some time later, they both go to the gym and he looks around and says, "I'm sorry," which is pretty good here. Jendo asks, does he really think so? A confused man approaches them and says that he took a break for lunch. Welcome to the Strong Body Gym. Is this their first time here? Sunwoo agrees and says they would like to register. The man says that they have opening discounts, so if he takes a 3-month subscription, it will cost him 160,000 won. How does he like this offer? Sangwoo says that in this case, he will take a subscription for 3 months at once. Can he see if he is doing the right exercise on each of the simulators? He thinks his clone will do it later anyway. The coach agrees and says that it is not difficult for him. It will help them complete the payment. Some time later, Sangwoo starts practicing and lifts the barbell. After that, he gets up and the coach says that he is doing well. This is how the bench press is done on an inclined bench. Over time, it should increase the load and accelerate. He doesn't have time to finish because someone is shouting very loudly. Jendo lifts the barbell with a lot of weight and makes very loud noises. This caught the attention of the coach, Sangwoo, and a couple of other people who were working out in this gym, and they all looked at him in surprise. When Jendo finished practicing, he put the barbell back in place. He sits up and looks at the muscles in his arm with a satisfied expression. A coach came up to him and said it was amazing. It looks like he's been doing this for a long time. Jendo laughs sheepishly and says it's his first time. Coach asks, then he probably got a boost in strength after waking up, didn't he? What is his current strength level? Jendo laughs and says that he doesn't have much, just to 1 point. The coach was surprised by this and says that strength really helps to work out in the gym, although he relies more on endurance. He even envies him. Sangwoo looks at him in surprise and thinks that it turns out that the skill he was talking about is strength. If a banal strength augmentation skill has such a serious effect, then how strong are other high-level hunters? Apparently, it's not for nothing that everyone talks only about hunters, although this is a dangerous job. His phone starts ringing, and he immediately notices it. He answers the phone and asks who it is. Sangwoo recognized him and greeted him. Dokjul asks if he got home all right yesterday. Some time later, he takes the elevator up and thinks Kim Jendo is a freak. He didn't register after this submission. Some time ago, he asked if he started going to this gym. How would he be able to work out properly if he was just jealous of it? Sangwoo said that he had to admit that he didn't sign up because that cute coach wasn't there today. Jendo was very upset and agreed with this. At this moment, Sunwoo has reached the right floor and thinks it's even better because now he doesn't have to worry about the clone. He comes to apartment number 603 and asks, "Isn't that where it is?" He hears voices from the other side of the door and thinks it must be noisy. The girl asks her dad why he decided everything himself. Dokjul opened the door and hit Sun at the door. And his daughter asks, he already called him, didn't he? He should call him and tell him not to come. He says he's going to work, so if they don't like something, they can tell him themselves. After he left the apartment, he turned around and was surprised. Sang-woo is holding onto the part of his face that was hit by the door. Doksul's daughter stands in the hallway and stares at them for a while. She was very surprised when she noticed Sang-woo. They've entered the apartment, and he's holding a cloth to his head after that door slam. Doksul is very upset about this and apologizes to him and says that he didn't notice him. Sang-woo says he's fine. A woman puts a sliced apple on a plate on the table and asks, "Is this the same tutor?" She looks at him in surprise and says that she didn't even recognize him because he was so thin. Sang-woo says he's been doing sports lately. He hadn't seen her in a long time. He pulls the cloth away from his head and is about to say something, but stops. He looks at Doksul's daughter and asks, "So this is Han?" Her face flushed with embarrassment, and she agreed with him. Sang-woo tells her name and says it's nice to meet her. From today on, he will be her tutor. He had heard about her planning to go to Jeonguk University. Was that true? Doksul smiles broadly and says she should look at how red she is. His wife says that just a couple of seconds ago, she was out rag. Hae-yoon looks away in embarrassment, agrees, and says that he said it right. She thinks it's very awkward. He must have heard her screaming. Sunwoo asks, is she in her senior year right now? He would like to see her progress before class starts. Hae-young is very surprised when she hears this and asks, did he say academic performance? Some time later, Sang-woo looks at the piece of paper that was brought to him and a small smile appears on his face. On this piece of paper, it was written that her ranking was very low, as was her rank by class, school, and country. Doksul and his wife laugh at his reaction, and Hae-young covers her face with her hands in embarrassment. He quietly gets up from the table and grabs his clothes. He runs away from the apartment and says that it's time for him to go to work, and he is grateful to him for coming. His wife was surprised by this and called him a traitor. Sang-woo has noticed something and is staring at it intently. Hae-young sits in front of him with a sad expression because of her grades. He says everything will be fine. He didn't get good SAT scores either. She was overjoyed when she heard this and asks, is this true? They should try and do their best. Hae-young agreed with him with a happy expression on her face. He says they can start from today. They will study twice a week. Some time later, Sunwoo goes to his house and thinks that they have a long way to go. He thinks back to how he used to study with Hae-young in her room. At this moment, he hangs up his jacket and says that luckily, it's not as hopeless as he thought it would be. He sits down at the computer and says that number 1 must have already gone to work. He thinks that he gave him a spare phone. But if the number of clones increases in the future, it will be hard for him to buy more phones. He goes to the Hunter site and looks at the screen. Sunwoo wonders if he should look for skills that are similar to his own on the Hunter site. The site has various ads for selling skills, magic scrolls, and items. He clicked on the headline with the title Highly Recommended Summoning Skill, Familiar Skill, Details, the ability to share feelings with your pet or summoned creature. Because the senses are connected, they share even one review. This is a useful skill for sending creatures alone and earning XP. He switched to the title called Selling the Teleportation Skill Scroll. Details, this is a teleportation skill scroll. This skill is already used by many people. It is highly recommended to buy for faction leaders. During use, you can go directly to where the skill owner wants you to go, for 100. The price for this scroll was so high, and Sang-woo began to cry. He wiped his face and says that if he had so much money, he would have bought a house instead of a skill. He says it will take him forever to buy even one skill. Do hunters earn so much money that they can afford it? This is still in a low price category. He looks at his balance through his phone and sees that he has $233,201 only. After that, Sang-woo lay down on the bed with a displeased expression on his face. He looks up at the ceiling and asks if maybe he should become a hunter. He's looking at a news bulletin on his phone with the headline, One Person's Company. How doesn't a class hunter live? Owner of the most expensive apartment in Korea, Chundon. After looking at the hunter news, he put away his phone and started to get out of bed. He thinks it's a great skill. Besides, he can't waste it on this kind of work. He steeled himself and picked up one of his sweaters. He gets dressed and says that he will try to become a hunter. The system notifies that resilience has been unlocked. What is a hunter? In the 2000 year, at the same time, portals began to appear all over the earth, from which monsters climbed. This incident later called the Great Catastrophe. killed more than half of the world's population. It seemed that the end of humanity had come. But at the same time that the disaster began, super people with special abilities began to appear. With them on the front lines, humanity barely managed to win this war. Now in the year 2024, the profession of hunting the remaining monsters has appeared. These specialists are called hunters. Sangwoo watches a video on his phone in which the man says that if the person passes the test, they will get a state-issued license and will be able to legally kill monsters. Now they can understand a few subtleties that will help them pass the test. Sunwoo pulls out the earpiece from his ear, looks at the building in front of him in surprise, and says, "What does this mean?" Hunter Center. He's looking at a very tall building that's been surrounded by a lot of people. He stretches his arm and says that he doesn't know it, thanks to this unlocked resilience stat. But lately, he's had enough of a couple of hours of sleep to keep him awake. He goes inside and sees a man buying a gun for himself at a 25 degrees discount. The other man takes the gun apart and does something with the bullets for that weapon. Another mysterious man wearing a large hat that covers most of his face is standing in this building. Sangwoo looks around and is very surprised by what he sees in this hunter center. He keeps looking around and thinking, which seems like not many people take the test. The girl announces that registration for the hunter's license exam, which will be held in the basement, will end in 20 minutes. She is grateful for the attention. Sunwoo is very worried about this test and wonders if this event is being held in the basement. Sometime later, at the hunter exam room, Sunwoo walks into this room and asks for forgiveness. He sees a lot of different people sitting in their seats, and some of them looked at him. This is Sunwoo very confused and wonders why there are so many of them. Did he just say he was sorry when he came in? Who is this idiot anyway? A man in a military uniform enters the room and stomps loudly. This man is staying in this office and says he's glad to see them all. His name is Hunmang H. Wen, and he's a C-class hunter. Today he will be their examiner. The license exam consists of a written part, a practical test, and an aptitude test. If they are caught cheating, they will be disqualified from this exam and will not be able to retake this year. Is that clear to everyone? He says with a very serious look that they don't forgive those who cheat. The guys who came to this test were very confused because of what he said and how he looked at them. Sangwoo was also surprised and thinks that this man is exerting terrifying pressure. Hanmang Wan says they will now start the hunter's license exam. Some time later, someone is driving in a car with an earpiece in his ear. This man agrees and says that they will transfer everything before the end of the month. His boss should just wait a bit. He has been working in this field for several years. He hears some very loud sounds through the earpiece, and it confused him. This man is Executive Director Kong from Jam Agency. He says it's crazy. Money does not come easily, but flows like sand through your fingers. He looks at his watch and says that the hunter exam should be over soon. At the same time, Sunwoo looks at his bracelet and the system congratulates him on being an F-class hunter. He looks at this notification with great surprise and incomprehension. He scratches his head and wonders if this is the end of it. Everyone said it was easy, so they only thought about how easy it was. It's like getting a driving license. The questions at the written stage were simple. He just needed to remember a couple of things. Before the practice test, they were given a lot of time to prepare, and the target was hung close enough. Sangwoo held a gun in his hand and asked, how much time can he spend on training? The guy who was standing next to him said that they didn't have a time limit. This news surprised him. Sangwoo T. Hanmang H1 asked him if he ever wanted to kill a person. Sangwoo said that of course he never wanted to do that. He says that in this case, he passed the test. In the present, Sunwoo is walking down a corridor and thinks that this job involves risking your life and using a gun. Is it normal that the entry threshold is so low? He goes outside, raises his head, and stares at something that has caught his attention for a while. He looks at the hunter center and thinks that he has a feeling that the government wants them to become hunters. He exhales and says he won't think about it. His attention is drawn to people in expensive suits who give business cards to people who have become hunters. Two men in similar suits stand next to each other and pass their business cards with friendly expressions. One of the new hunters took a business card and communicates with a friendly man in a suit who has a drink in his hand. Sunwoo looks at these people and wonders, are they guild representatives who are trying to recruit hunters? His attention was drawn to the fact that one of the guild representatives came up to him handed him a business card, and said that he congratulated him on passing the exam for obtaining a hunter's license. Sang-woo looks at this business card that has contact information written on it, Jam Agency Executive Director Kong Jun-mo, and asks, "Is he from Jam Agency?" Jun-mo gives his name and says that he wants to offer cooperation. With every purchase or search for hunting items for a small fee, they are ready to provide him with the best deals. Sang-woo was embarrassed by this, agreed, and thanked him for it. Suddenly, a system window appeared in front of him, which he didn't immediately notice. He was very surprised when he noticed what was in front of him and carefully reads it. The system notifies that the cloning skill level has been increased. The active clone skill is now level 2. This skill creates a clone that looks like the user, using energy. The maximum number of clones depends on the user's level. The number of clones available for summoning at a time is 2. Jun-mo says with a friendly expression that his agency is the best in the matter. He doesn't have time to finish his sentence due to Sang-woo running away from him, and says that he will contact him later. Jun-mo was very upset about this, and tears started streaming down his face, but he agrees and asks him not to forget about it. After a while, Sang-woo returned to his home. He stands in the room, covering his face with his hand and laughing out loud. Next to him is the first clone, and he says that nothing can be better than cloning. He summons the second clone, which also appeared without clothes like the first one, and some steam was coming from it. Sang-woo tells number 2 that he is looking forward to working with him. He looks at the business card he received that day, and says that they are now ready to become hunters. At the same time, Jun-mo threw the remaining business cards on the seat of his car and says that he handed out almost all the business cards. He straightens his tie and says that he hopes to be contacted. He turns to the side and looks at the city at night, which is illuminated by the light of lanterns and his reflection in the window. He recalls what happened at the official representative office of Korea's leading guild, Hisung. There were several documents with columns on someone's desk, and there was a sound. The man drinks from his mug, looks at the documents, and says that he only needs to settle the amount according to what is written in the documents. Something strange about this document caught his attention, and he looks at it blankly. One of the documents with the heading total amount says that the price for slime is $20,001 only. The price for the horn of a horned hare is $40,001 only. The price for troll blood is $2 million for $100,001 only. Jun-mo is confused about what he's read and wants to say something about it. He says the amount is rather suspicious. The price for a troll rabbit should reach at least $5 million only. The man sitting in front of him smiles and calls his name. He looks at him with indifference and asks, "He joined the Hisong Guild a long time ago, right?" Jun-mo agrees with him and says that he is right about this. The man says that this means that he should already understand everything. These words surprised him very much. The man puts his mug on the table and asks if they follow all the rules and do everything they have to do, then what will be left for them? He puts his hand on Jun-mo's shoulder and says that he understands that he is a good citizen, but he should not interfere in the internal affairs of the guild. He walks past him and asks with a smile if he understood that. Jun-mo was outraged by this and clutched the documents tightly in his hand out of anger, but he endured it. Currently, he puts his hand to his forehead and says that if he knew how hard it was going to be, he would have kept his mouth shut. At the same time, his phone, which was in the inside pocket of his jacket, starts ringing. Jun-mo was surprised to hear someone calling him and looking for his phone in his pocket. He answers this call, gives his name, and says that the representative of the Jam Agency is listening. Sang-woo greeted him, gave him his name, and says that he gave him his business card. He would like to clarify a couple of points. After some time in one of the coffee shops, which is located in the city, Jun-mo has entered this building and is looking around. What catches his attention is that Sang-woo has raised his hand and is telling him that he's here. Jun-mo sits down in front of him with a confused expression and apologizes for keeping him waiting. Sang-woo says with a calm expression that it's not a big deal since he just came in. Jun-mo asks if he would like to order something to drink. Sang-woo agrees with him and looks at the man who works at the establishment. Sometime later, they order drinks and Jun-mo starts a conversation with him. He asks with a happy expression he would like to go to a territory that even a novice can handle, right? Sang-woo agrees with him, and after that, he apologizes and asks if he can find out what skill he has. He holds his drink in his hand with a calm expression and says that his skill is cloning. Jun-mo made a serious expression and thinks that he has already heard about the cloning skill. Is it a skill that creates illusions that are incapable of anything? Well, he's a rookie with illusions that are physically incapable of anything and won't help in the hunt. So, Sunwoo, meanwhile, drinks all of his coffee in one gulp. Junmo was surprised by what he did and says that he has a great skill. He hands him the documents and says it's a contract. He should read it. First of all, he will recommend a territory for hunting slugs. This type of monster isn't too aggressive, so it's relatively harmless, although they are capable of releasing some liquids and poisonous gas. To visit this area, it is recommended to wear a mask and protective clothing. It is not so easy. Sunwoo took a picture of the document and says it's not a problem for him. Junmo says that the second area to choose from is the horned rabbit hunting area. There it is possible to hunt for a long time, but since the prey is difficult to catch, he will not be able to earn much. There's a safe barrier there, so he can hunt safely in this area as well. There are also low-class monsters, such as giant rats, but only the aforementioned monster lives in Tur. Sanglu listens to him and looks at the two documents in his hand. He keeps looking at it and says he likes both of these places, and the cost of items for sale is attractive. He puts the documents on the table and says that he would like to sign a contract. Junmo thanked him for this with a friendly expression on his face. He writes something down in his notebook and says that he mentioned that he likes both of these territories. Which one does he want to choose? Sunwoo, who is wearing a different outfit, slammed a small object loudly on the table and says that he didn't understand it. This surprised Junmo a lot, and he goes on to say that when he said that he liked about these places, he raises his hand, and the document has the seal that he just put on it. Junmo was very surprised by what happened and looked at the person who put the seal within comprehension. Sangwoo and the clones say at the same time that he meant that he would hunt in both places at once. Junmo remembers something that happened to him a while ago. He says it's nice to meet him. He had heard that his skill was cloning. The masked guy agrees and says it's true. Junmo asks if he can take a look at this skill in action. The guy raises his hand in front of him and says that of course he can demonstrate this. He starts using his skill and creates several clones from different angles. He created 4 of his clones to stand behind him. Junmo is surprised when he sees this. A smile appears on his face and he looks at it. All the clones that this guy has summoned begin to draw their swords from behind their backs. All the clones point their swords at the guy who summoned them and wait for a while. Junmo is surprised by this and asks him to stop. The guy doesn't listen to him and all the clones strike with their swords. All the clones pierce the body of the guy who created them. Junmo is very scared of this and screams in surprise and asks, "What is he even doing?" The guy politely asks him to calm down. Junmo is still very worried about what happened, but he slowly opens his eyes and looks at him blankly. The guy who was just stabbed by the sword says that they are just an illusion, they are not real. Junmo reaches for one of the swords and asks if he can touch it. His hand goes right through and the guy says that illusions can't do any harm. He removes his clones and says that however, it's good for distracting the monster's attention. Junmo tries to calm down after being so shaken up and says that he has seen enough. At this moment, Junmo was surprised by what happened and thinks that the previous cloning skill he saw was definitely related to illusions. He looks at Sunwoo and his clone and thinks that however, this clone has put a seal on the contract that he issued. And what's more, this clone can drink coffee. He starts to get a little nervous and thinks that this is the first time he has encountered such a skill. Junmo looks at one of them excitedly and asks, could they be twins? He continues to laugh, pointing at the clones and saying that he thought they were twins. It is quite reasonable to assume this. He put his hand on the clone who is sitting at the table. He says it's his clone. He understands that this skill can be confused with another similar one, but this is not an illusion. Actually, there is another clone, but he sent it to the fitness center. Junmo is surprised by this and asks, did he say fitness center? Can clones really build muscle? Young Sangwoo agrees and says that if his clones get stronger, then so does he. Junmo is still surprised by this and says that he can even raise his stats with clones. It's just amazing. He thinks with a serious expression that this isn't some ordinary F-class hunter's skill. It has a huge potential. Sunwoo says that going back to the hunting ground, he would like to ask him something. Will there be any problems if the same person enters 2 places at the same time? Junmo thinks about this and says that it might be difficult because the login process is recorded. Sangwoo starts crying and thinks that maybe he won't be able to do it. Junmo says that, however, he will talk to the Hunter Association and they will find a way to solve this problem. In return, since it would be necessary to scan the bracelet and demonstrate his skill, could he go with it? Sunwoo agrees and says that he just won't be able to use the skill until tomorrow night. This is because of the skill's cooldown time. Junmo understands him and says that in that case, they can meet at the Hunter Center in 2 days. Well, now about the contract. Sangwoo says that he has already set the seal. At the same time, he checked all the details from the photo number to had sent him. Junmo stood up very abruptly, which surprised and scared him a lot. He holds out his hand and tells him that he is looking forward to their cooperation. He shook the hand that Junmo held out to him. He says that he too will look forward to their collaboration. 2 days later, near the Hunter Center, Sanwoo stands in the park and looks around while waiting for someone. Junmo calls him Hunter, and he immediately turns around at the sound of his voice. He straightens his tie as he walks over to him and tells him that he came early enough. Just like him, though, Sangwoo says he came early just in case he's already here waiting for him. The Hunter Association is located in the Hunter Center. Junmo says that most of the departments operate in this building. They must go. They went to the terminal inside the building, and he was given queue number 166. Someone announces that Hunter number 164 is to go to window A3. Hunter number 165 is to go to window B1. Hunter number 166 is to go to window E4. The guy who works at the Hunter Center asks if he wants to get dual access to hunting grounds. Sunwoo agrees and says that since he has the cloning skill, but the identification bracelet is only one. The guy asks him to wait a minute. He says that he is still the first person after the jumper to request a duplicate. He asks the chief where the document regarding dual access is located. Sangwoo looks at this and thinks that it is highly expected that this is not a typical situation. The chief says he can look in the folder over there. Some time later, the guy brought a lot of documents and says that here is an application for a permit. They must go to the civil service office for processing the relevant documents. They can take the test in the skills demo room. They were both surprised at how many papers he had brought. Junmo looks at these papers and says that he will sort out the papers, but he has to go to the showroom in the meantime. Sangwoo agreed to this and thanked him. Sometime later, Jinmo has filled out all the paperwork and is handing it over to the girl who works here. Sanwoo is standing in front of another girl with a device behind her. He starts using his skill and energy appears around him. He creates a clone next to him and he stands without clothes on. This made him and the girl very uncomfortable, but she smiled and adjusted her glasses. Some time later, some old man with glasses works and creates a bracelet. He stares at the bracelet he just created and thinks about it. He gives a thumbs up and says that the request for an identical bracelet ID has been completed. Clones can enter a hunting area by scanning their fingerprints. Taking into account the features of the cloning skill, they took into account the possibility of simultaneous entry and exit from different places, as well as re-entry of clones. Sunwoo thanked him for that. An old man with a red face puts his hands on the clone's shoulders and says that by the Washington. Sangwoo takes his clone away, laughs sheepishly, and says it's time for them to go. He is grateful for the bracelet. The old man looks at it and thinks that it could be a great object for research. Very sorry. Sangwoo went out to the hall and says all the business is settled. Junmo notices him and congratulates him on it. Sunwoo stands next to clone number 2 and says that the preparations for the solo hunt are finally complete. Junmo says that's right. Does that mean he's going to the hunting grounds right now? Sunwoo agrees and says that he has nothing else to do today. Junmo asks why is his clone hidden behind a mask. Sangwoo says he doesn't want to draw too much attention to him. While they are talking to each other, someone's standing on the top floor and is watching them. That man smiled broadly and chuckled. This man is the head of the Hisong Guild, Shin Hisong. He says he already thought about who it might be. It turns out that it was Kong Junmo. He calls out to him very loudly and gets his attention. Shin Hisong jumps down from this balcony. He jumps down to the first floor, and it is very surprising to those people who saw it. He smiles and says they haven't seen each other for a long time, especially in a place like this. Sunwoo is surprised when he recognizes this person and thinks that he is the head of the Hisong Guild after all. Hisong gets up and says that he didn't even know that he was still dealing with hunters. Sunwoo looked up and thinks that he jumped down from a height of at least several floors. Junmo is embarrassed about meeting the guild head and looks at him with a serious expression. He greets this sir even though he is not happy about this meeting. He can't stop laughing. He stops laughing and asks who is this guy. Junmo says it's a hunter connected to his company. Haesung examines Sangwoo, who is standing next to him. He says that it turns out that he is a hunter. Of course, he examines it and asks, "It's probably F class, isn't it?" Sungwoo was very confused because he guessed which class he was in. Haesung tries to hold back his laughter and says that it was hard for him to be away from home. Who was working with C and B class hunters has completely fallen off. He breaks down, starts laughing very loudly, and says that he can't believe that he's supervising some F class hunter and that he's wearing such a sweater. Junmo is very angry about what he said and wants to say to him. Sangwoo put a hand on his shoulder to make him stop. He walked up to him with a smile and Junmo was surprised at what he was doing. Haesung stops laughing, wipes away his tears, and looks at them. He smiles very viciously and says that it looks like this F-class hunter has something to say. Sangwoo looks at him and smiles widely with a very friendly expression. He keeps smiling and says that he is just flattered to meet the head of the guild, which is considered the first in the country. Haesung is interested in him and says that it turns out that he has a good eye. At least he has some common sense. Sunwoo has changed his mood and says that the guild is the first in the country to monopolize dungeons and ban territories for hunting, and also by the payment coefficient in your favor. He can't believe that he received praise from the head of such a guild. Haesung keeps smiling. Even though he's hiding his anger, Sangwoo smiles back at him and tells him that he doesn't even know what to do. Haesung stretches his neck and says that he was quite brave. He turns to him and gives him a very evil smile, and his eyes light up with energy. He very quickly moved behind him and asks if maybe he has the skills to match the courage. Sunwoo is very surprised by this, and sweat starts to run down his face, and he turns around to look at him. A guy with glasses has come up to them and is calling loudly for someone. He runs to them and tells them that he has finally found it. Haesung notices this guy and says that the fun destroyer has come. He lets Sangwoo go and says they should finish for today. He smiles slightly and asks what is his name. Sunwoo asks, why doesn't he find out on his own? Haesung laughs and says he's a funny guy. He will meet Sir Kong Junmo again. The guy with glasses says that if he behaves like this inside the association building, he doesn't have time to finish because Haesung interrupts him and says that he knows about it. Some time later, Sangwoo is riding in Junmo's car with the clone. He continues driving and says that he is grateful for what he did. Sangwoo turns to him and says that he couldn't just stand there and watch this. Junmo asks if he was aware of his relationship with the Haesung Guild. Sangwoo says he's not an idiot after all. He found out by doing a bit of research on the GM agency. Although there wasn't much information on the net, during his search, he discovered a rumor regarding Agent Kong Junmo. According to an insider, he was kicked out of the Haesung Guild. Someone wrote on the forum that the JM agency is very bad. Their representative is a former employee of the Haesung Guild. For those who sign a contract with this agency, the gates to hell will open. Junmo says this means that even this case was leaked on the internet. Now it's clear why no one is joining them. Sangwoo says that someone even said that there is no way to join the agency, because then this person will become a target for the Haesung Guild. Junmo asks, then in that case why did he choose their agency? Sangwoo only thinks about money and says that he chose this agency because of the pay ratio. The clone who sits in the back seat looks at them and listens to what they say. Sangwoo looks out the window and says that he can still trust him if he doesn't like something about the industry or the guild. Junmo is surprised by what he said, but he still drives the car. They continue to drive across the bridge, and he thanked him for that. At the same time, in the fitness room where Sunwoo left his clone to train, the clone holds the barbell with shaking hands that bleed from very long workouts. His legs are shaking very badly, and his veins are protruding very much. He struggles to lift the bar while his entire body shakes violently, and a guy passing by looks at him in surprise. The coach looks at him with concern and expects what will happen next. A girl approaches him and says that one look is enough to tell how dangerous it is, for is he going to be alright? The amazing thing is that he continues to study, no matter what. The coach says he tried to talk to him, but he won't listen. An alert comes to the clone's phone and it attracts his attention. He abruptly lifts the bar and puts it back in place. He picked up the phone and Sang-woo texted him that he should finish training and take a shower. At 4 o'clock, he must wait at the entrance to the hall. The clone leaves the hall and drinks water from a jar at a time. The coach covers his face with his hand and says that he is very happy about it. After some time in the dungeon, in which there are many slimes that release gas, someone strikes and destroys one of these slimes. Sang-woo is holding the hammer that he used to strike with in one hand, and the vacuum cleaner that is attached to the device on his back in the other. He uses this device and draws in the slime that's left over from the defeated slime. He fills the tank on his back with this slime, with this vacuum cleaner. After that, he turns around and walks towards the entrance, where several armed guards are standing. Sun-woo takes off his gas mask and exhales, sweat running down his face. Jun-mo puts his hand on his shoulder and asks how is it. Sun-woo says that working in a gas mask is very difficult. He was breathing as if through several face masks. Jun-mo agrees and says that although the slug site is considered safe, hunters usually don't come here. In addition, the profit here is small. Sang-woo looks at his ruined glove and says that he understands why. He doesn't think he can hold out for long. Jin-ho says he can hunt until the container is full, then he just needs to replace it in the rented locker. However, no matter how much endurance the hunter has, it will be extremely difficult to hold out for 6 hours. He thinks about the equipment and says that he doesn't know if this is true. But Sang-woo says that he doesn't think he can even spend 2 hours there, let alone 6. He points to the clone standing next to him and asks what happens if number 2 goes. He took off his cap and put on a gas mask. The clone puts on a protective suit and ties the laces on his shoes. He also puts new gloves on his hands. Sang-woo cries and wishes good luck to number 2, while Jun-mo looks at him blankly. The clone goes into the cave and waves to them. Sang-woo turns around and says they can now look at the field of horned rabbits. Jun-mo agrees with this hunter. Sang-woo turns around, points at the empty space with his hand, and says that they will go together with number 1. He's embarrassed that his clone wasn't there, and remembers that he hasn't picked it up from the gym yet. The clone is standing in the middle of the street with his bag, and his legs are shaking violently. The clone is standing on the street in front of the road and waiting for something. Jun-mo's car pulls up to him and pulls up next to him. Sun-woo climbs out of the window and tells number 1 that he has to get inside. After a while, when it was already getting dark outside, Jun-mo asks, so does he call his clones number 1 and number 2? Sang-woo agrees and says that they all look the same, so if he gives them any interesting names, it will only confuse them. Jun-mo looked at it and says that since it's about clones, names don't seem to be necessary. Sun-woo agrees to this. He says that by the way, he has heard that pistols are used to hunt horned hares. Jun-mo agrees to this. Sun-woo introduces himself with a gun and asks, in that case, if he needs to prepare certain equipment. Jun-mo says he doesn't have to worry about it. Of course, he can use his own equipment, but you can also rent most. Of the necessary items on the territory itself for hunting. One day, he should get his own equipment, since rented items can only be used on the territory for hunting. Sun-woo was surprised when he heard some strange sounds that caught his attention. He asks, what was that sound? Junwoo says that they came to Ujiangsan territory. There was a lot of equipment on this territory, and several helicopters are flying over the base. There are a lot of armed people standing around this building. People in the same uniform stand at the entrance to the territory where ordinary hunters enter. Sun-woo gets out of the car with the clone and says that this place is just gigantic. It's not even close to the slug territory. Jun-mo agrees and says he's right about that. This is the famous Uyeonsan territory where the monster breakout occurred. Sun-woo thinks about the monster breakout and thinks that he has heard about it. Usually, the portal doesn't let monsters out. Because of this, hunting mostly takes place inside the portal. However, in some cases, monsters pass through the barrier, destroy the surrounding area, and turn the place itself into a territory. This is what they call monster breakout. Junlo says that during the breakthrough 5 years ago, most of the high-ranked monsters were defeated. Only F and E-rank monsters remained in the territory. Therefore, this place is revered by hunters as an excellent field for hunting. Sang-woo wonders if no one is complaining about the noise. He and Jun-mo go inside the building that was located in this area. In this building, there are stands with weapons and a lot of hunters. Jun-mo points to the man standing next to the gun and says that he can rent everything he needs over there. The man threw a crate on the floor and says that a rifle and night vision goggles, rent space and earplugs, plus 400 rounds of ammunition. In total, it will all cost 700,000 won. Sang-woo takes out his card, a tear runs down his face, and says it's too much. Junmo says it's mostly the price of bullets. But everything will pay off with a successful hunt for hares. The price for one horn is comparable to one bucket of slime. They go up the stairs, and he says that their place is in Building F on the 3rd floor. Sang-woo asks, so this area is divided into zones even inside. Junmo stopped in front of the door and says that they have arrived at the place. They can hear very loud noises, but he immediately covered his ears, and Sang-woo was very scared when he heard that. In the building where they entered, a lot of people shoot their weapons at monsters. The man with the cigarette in his mouth says it looks like he missed again. Another man uses some kind of device to pick up the body of a dead rabbit monster. There were many similar monster bodies in his bag. Sang-woo looks around the room in surprise and is surprised by what is happening. Junmo points to a chair with his hand and says seat number 4. I think that's it. He puts a crate next to the seat and asks if he is confident in his shooting skills. Sang-woo takes out his weapon and asks with a small smile, who does he think he is? He examines the weapon and says that in the exam for obtaining a hunter's license, he missed only 3 times. Junmo is confused about this and asks, did he miss so many times on such a close target? Sang-woo raises his rifle and says he already feels sorry for the horned rabbits. He doesn't finish his sentence and sticks earplugs in his ears. He takes aim and says that these monsters won't be able to escape from his eagle gaze. Junmo is worried about him, confused by what he said, and thinks it's lucky everyone's wearing earplugs. Sang-woo finds one of the rabbit monsters with the scope, and this surprised him greatly. He says very loudly that he found it. Junmo is surprised when he hears this and asks, has he found it yet? Sang-woo slowly targets the head of this rabbit that he just found. He slowly pulls the trigger of his rifle. An empty shell casing flies out of his rifle, and he thinks the hunt is starting. 3 hours later, in the same place where the hunters were hunting the rabbit monsters, Sang-woo was very depressed about what happened and covers his face with his hands. He was very depressed because of this and thinks that he didn't hit any water monster. He leans back in his chair and says it doesn't make sense. He remembers what happened and thinks that he took a good aim. The moment he fired his shot, the rabbit monster heard it and its ears started twitching. This monster immediately starts to run away, and because of this, his bullet hit the ground. Sang-woo closes his eyes and says that as soon as he shoots, these monsters constantly run away, even that agent had already left him some time ago. Junmo says with a confused expression that it's quite late. Sang-woo understood what he wanted to say and says that he shouldn't stay too long. In the present, he says that he couldn't even work out the bullet costs. Maybe that's enough for today. He calls out to number 1, and his clone immediately turns to him. Sang-woo says he should shoot these rabbits with a gun and collect the corpses with a harpoon. If successful, it should send him a message with the number 1, and if the bullets run out, he has to call. He lets out a frustrated sigh at what just happened. He says he will go home after all. Some time later, Sang-woo is lying in his bed, and the system window in front of him says that his mana has increased by 0.3 points. He keeps looking at these system alerts and thinks that at least number 2 is doing a great job with slugs. The system window shows his stats: strength improved to 0, 732 point, reflexes 0, 518 points. Health's on 679 points. Stamina is at 563 points. Mana Zoan and 37 points. Shooting Zithro 12 points. Sang-woo looks at this and thinks that his stats continue to grow. But he recalls the incident with Shin Hae-sung that happened at the Hunter Center. Sang-woo closes his eyes and thinks that he still has a long way to go. He yawns as he thinks about everything that's happened to him. He thinks that the capture of the horned rabbits turned out to be a complete failure. He didn't think it would be so difficult. He sighs at the disappointment of this job. He closes his eyes and says that he would like number 1 to catch at least one such monster. After that, he fell asleep, and after a while, alerts started coming to his phone. His phone continues to vibrate due to the many messages he receives. The pop-up messages say that he has 46 unread messages from number 1. After some time in the afternoon in the city, Juno stands in the office and looks out the window with a thoughtful expression on his face. His attention is drawn to the fact that his phone rang and the melody turned on. He answers this call, greets you, and says it's AJM agency. The person who called him asks, "Is this the agency that Hunter Young Sang-woo belongs to?" Jin-mo agrees and says it's all right. The person who called him says that this is the manager of the slug territory. He must come immediately and stop him. Jin-mo asks, what is he talking about? The manager says that Young Sang-woo has been hunting for more than 24 hours, and now he's not himself anymore. Jun-mo was very surprised when he heard what was said to him. He took his jacket and loudly says that he will arrive as soon as he can. Some time later, Sun-woo wakes up in his room and says he had a good night's sleep. He looks at the screen of his phone and asks, "Is this from number 1? Did he run out of bullets?" He was very surprised when he noticed something strange. He asks why he got so many messages from him. He realized what this meant and was very surprised by it. At the same time, on the territory where slime extraction takes place, Junmo stands next to the armed men and looks at something in surprise. He sees many large storage areas that have been filled with slime. He was very surprised by this and wonders if he filled all these tanks in just one day. Two very worried men in military uniforms stand and try to stop the clone that has been working all this time. This clone's gas mask starts to bleed and his head is lowered down. Junmo looks at this clone, who is giving off a dark aura. He is about to make a phone call and thinks that now is not the time to be surprised by what happened. Sang-woo answered his call and greeted him. Junmo says on the phone that he has some good news. He's currently in the slug territory, and his clone has filled up all the slime storage in a day. They're gonna call the cleaners, so he should order number 2 to stop hunting. Sang-woo says he's happy to hear it, but can he send the cleaners to Wujang-sin as well? Junmo is surprised by this and asks what does he mean by that. Sang-woo, along with the crowd of people, looks at the large number of rabbit monsters that have been killed and is about to say something. Next to his clone gathered a huge crowd of people who look at the mountain of rabbits killed by him monsters. And he says that there is already a whole passage littered with corpses. Surprised by this, people say that they can't even count all these bodies. This is crazy. One of them films this pile of monster bodies on his phone and says that it seems that no one will notice if he takes it off. People look at the clone covered in monster blood and ask, did he catch them all on his own? A man in a suit comes up to him and tells this hunter that he has incredible skills. He holds out a business card that says Brown Bear Guild. Recruitment team number 2. Team leader Kim Benzik, he asks, can he find out if he is already a member of any guild? The clone continues to sit still and doesn't respond to him. Kim Benzik clutches his business card tightly in frustration and thinks that he should be patient since most talented people are weird. Another man standing next to him caught his attention by laughing and telling him he couldn't do it. One of the many people in suits says that they have already tried to talk to him, but he did not respond in any way. Kim Byung-sik was surprised to see recruiters from major guilds. He says that at least a few words should have been said. The other man repeats to him that he didn't tell them anything. Sun-woo walked over to the clone and placed the box on the floor next to it. He turned to the clone and said quietly that there were extra bullets. He had to keep hunting, and if an agent came, he had to let him take care of the monster corpses. The clone agrees with him. Sang-woo pats him on the shoulder and tells number 1 that he did a great job. The clone was suddenly encouraged by these words. His face reddened, and he was very happy to be praised. Immediately after, he quickly loaded his rifle with new rounds. People are surprised by this and ask, does he really start hunting again? Is he seriously going to continue? One of the guys gestures to the others and tells them to be quiet. They should watch him hunt. Other people say loudly that it looks like he's starting to hunt again. They should take it down. Some time later, Sun-woo is tutoring Hyun and thinks that he must have underestimated the clone's abilities. At the moment, they receive 50 degrees of its stats. If you think about it in a simple way, you can come to the conclusion that they should be half as weak as him. But they are distinguished by the automatic desire to complete the task and the ability to make a decision without a fraction of doubt, fully focusing on doing it. Hae-young calls him teacher, but he doesn't pay attention to her because he's lost in his own thoughts. Sang-woo thinks they can do better than that. Hae-young raised her voice and called him teacher out loud to get attention. He is surprised because of this and asks what she wanted. She looks at him, tilts her head, and asks him what he's thinking. Sang-woo apologizes and says that he has finished checking. She had definitely improved since their last meeting. Hang is happy about this and asks, does he really think so? She was told that she could do better if she tried. Still, what was he thinking now? Sangwoo says that he recently visited the area for hunting, and everything went much better than he expected. Hang is very surprised by this and asks, "Did he say hunting area? So he's a hunter?" Sunwoo is surprised by this reaction and asks, "Didn't he mention it? He's still a newbie, though." Hang says she didn't even know about it. She looks at the screen of her phone and asks the teacher if he knows this hunter. Today, people on the internet do nothing but discuss it. Sunwoo asks who is she talking about. Hang shows him a video from the internet of his clone, who killed many monsters, and says that she is talking about the god of shooting, Eagle Yu Yenzin. Sangwoo was very surprised when he heard what she said. His whole body started shaking from shock, and he asks who is it, so he doesn't know about this. On the hunter site, everyone went crazy because of him. He has already killed more than 200 rabbits by the time this video was recorded. And this is already enough to set a new record. However, when people asked him questions, he didn't say a word to them, so everyone assumed that he was cool and mysterious. That's why this topic has made such a... Sangwoo was very surprised because of what he had just seen and learned. Hom looks at the screen of his phone with a small smile and asks, "Isn't he cool?" In fact, she dreams of becoming a hunter. Sangwoo decided to change the subject and asks, "Does she dream about this? Is she awake yet?" Hong agrees and says that she also got a license, but is a little afraid to go to the hunting grounds. She wants to say something, and is silent for a while, trying to figure out how to start. Her face is flushed, and she says that while we're on the subject, if she gets a good score on the test, can he go with her once? Sangwoo says it's not that it's difficult for him, but if she was going to university, then he would definitely take her with him. Hong is very happy about this and asks, "Is this true?" Sunwoo agrees and says that he knows of some safe hunting grounds. She holds out her hand, with her little finger sticking out, agrees, and says that then he should promise her. Sangwoo smiled slightly and let out a sigh when he heard that. After that, they crossed their little fingers as a sign of promise. Hae-young says with a happy expression that he doesn't have the right to change his mind. Sangwoo agrees and says that she just has to keep it up. She will definitely be able to enter Jongguk University. She agrees with him. Some time later, Sangwoo leaves her room and goes to another room. Ha-young's mom, who was washing the dishes, noticed this and turned to look at him. She keeps going about her business and asks with a friendly expression, "Is their class over yet?" Sangwoo smiles at her and agrees. She asks if her daughter is doing well. Ha-young overhears their conversation from the other side of the door, and Sangwoo says that he was also worried at first, but she is a very talented girl, so she has nothing to worry about. The woman says that she is very happy to hear this, even if it is fake. Sangwoo is about to leave and says he will be back on Monday. The woman was surprised when she heard this and said that it was already very late, he should eat before he left. Sangwoo says he still has some places to go. Han continues to eavesdrop, her face pressed against the door, sweat running down her face from excitement. She fell on the bed with a very confused expression and thinks that she will have another meeting with him. She creates a bright sphere over her hand with her skill and says that it turns out that he is a hunter. Thanks to this, their communication went smoothly. She thinks she didn't like the idea at first because it's an acquaintance of her father's. However, she remembers her lessons with Sangwoo and thinks that he is kind and good at explaining things. She puts the sphere away, squeezes the bear in her hand, and thinks that it is also very beautiful. Hae-young calms down a bit, sighs, and gets up from the bed. She sat down at her desk again and says she needs to study. After some time in the territory of Woojun Sun Hunters, Sanwoo goes up to the right floor and thinks he's wondering if the collection of corpses is finished. Junmo turns to look at him and notices that he's coming this way. He calls him Hunter and Sangwoo turns to him and asks, "So is he here too?" Junmo agrees and says that he should have checked out how the gathering is going. Where was he? Sangwoo says that he was tutoring. Junmo says that he has already called a team of gatherers to many territories to hunt. However, this was the first time he had to call so many people to collect the horned rabbits. Tristo made a total of 50 to rabbit monsters. This is quite a lot. Has he already checked the mutual settlements sent to him? Sangwoo takes out his phone and asks, has he sent this yet? He apologizes and says that he turned off notifications, so he hasn't seen it yet. His bank account says that his balance is 30,720,000 Tristo won, received 30,910,000 won, spent 3D Tristo won in the Shiro store. Sangwoo was very surprised when he saw how much money he had received. He turns around and with a very happy expression on his face asks, "Is this how much it should be?" Jinmo says that his hunter skills surpass F class, so he changed the calculation to 83 degrees, which corresponds to E class. Sang-woo looks at the screen of his phone in surprise and says that even though he doesn't belong to E class yet, he is grateful for it. A man with a big smile approaches them and calls out loudly. They all pay attention to him and look at him blankly. The man points a finger at the clone with a smile and asks, "Is he this freak's manager?" They all looked at the clone that he pointed his finger at. Junmo stands between them, agrees, and asks who is he. The man asks how he thinks. He is a hunter whose prey has been stolen. All the horned rabbits that he aimed at were killed by this freak, so today's hunt was completely failed by him. He stretches his neck and says that he feels like he should make up for his expenses. Junmo stared at him in confusion for a while and listened to what he was saying. He turns around and says it looks like they picked the wrong spot. Sang-woo was surprised by this and says that he didn't know that there were such people here. He thinks about what happened and has an idea. He turns around and says he has an idea. Junmo is a little surprised by this and asks what is his idea. The man is waiting for them and asks what they are talking about. He holds out his hand with a smile and says that he has a conscience. He must give him 10 degree of the income received. Sang-woo started laughing very loudly when he heard this. The man is very angry about this and asks if he thinks he's joking. Why is he laughing? Sang-woo puts his hand on the clone's shoulder and asks, what is he saying? This guy won't be coming for the next few days. He smiles and tells his agent that they should go. The man is even more angry about this and says that he is not finished yet. Where is this freak going to go? Where are they going? Sunwoo asks, why don't they go to the coffee shop on the corner? The man is very angry at what he did, turns to him, and is about to say something to him. He swings his fist to hit him and says he shouldn't ignore him. Sunwoo mentally ordered number 1 to act, and his clan immediately moved towards them very quickly. He very quickly heads towards this man who was throwing a punch. He was exposed to this blow, and the man was very surprised because of what happened. The clone was thrown back very hard due to that punch he just received. His body flies at high speed and crashes into the containers with rabbits that are placed on this floor. After that, his back hit the wall very hard and his body shuddered from the impact. He started coughing up blood and it leaves stains on his mask. The man is very surprised because of this and asks what it was. He hadn't hit him that hard. Sunwoo films it on his phone and says with mock surprise that he is very violent. It's an act of violence in a holy hunting ground. People won't just let it go, will they? Junmo is very embarrassed about what happened and agrees with him. The man began to worrying about what happened, looks around and wants to say something in his defense, but can't think of anything. Sang-woo continues to act very surprised and says how bad it will be if this video gets on the internet. He already sees this shocking news. New star, Eagle Eye, Jangsun has been beaten. The man is very worried and feels very much pressure. He stands in front of Sang-woo, who shows him the video he just shot. He smiles slyly and asks the man if they can just break up. He doesn't mind, does he? The man gritted his teeth very hard because he had no other choice. Sometime later, late in the evening, in a cafe where there were already several customers, Sang-woo asks in surprise, is he talking about the Heesung Guild? Junmo agrees and says that he feels that the hunter who attacked him today belongs to this guild. The clone sits next to them and listens to their dialogue. Sunwoo asks if there are any other freaks like this among them. Junma says that because the Heesung Guild is huge, there are completely different people gathering there. The clone starts drinking his drink, and Sang-woo asks how they knew he was from the Heesung Guild. Junwoo recalls that he called someone on the phone a while ago and says that he should contact all the gathering teams right now. They need a lot of people. He was being watched by the same man who attacked and is currently saying that this hunter has been keeping an eye on him since the moment he came to collect the corpses. Perhaps their guild will want to. He doesn't have time to finish because Sang-woo has guessed and says that he thinks they want Ri. Junwoo agrees and says that they did it because they thought his clone was another hunter who made a contract with them. Even before that, Jam hunters were harassed. It's awkward for him to say, but they didn't stay with them for a long time and they all left. At the moment, there were only a few F-class hunters left, including him. Even now, he can't promise that there won't be any more problems from the Heesung Guild. Sang-woo tells the agent that he shouldn't force him to change his mind. He already knew everything, but he joined anyway, so he doesn't have to worry. Junmo is very upset about what's going on, but he keeps telling him that of course he won't let them get away with it. So, as he said before, he has a plan to become stronger in a short time. Sang-woo continues to say something with a calm expression. Junmo listens carefully to what he's saying with a surprised expression on his face. They continue to discuss something for a while, sitting across from each other. Sometime later, Sang-woo asks with a happy expression, "What does he think?" Junmo thinks about it and says that he never thought about it. He writes something down in his notebook and asks, "Then, how about tomorrow, 2 o'clock in the afternoon?" Sunwoo agrees to this. Junmo says it's about the place. They can meet at the hunter's shop. After a while, Sunwoo thinks about the hunter's market and thinks that the trade in weapons, armor, and other items for hunting was from the very beginning. However, department stores have also reached the hunting field, taking most of the market for themselves. Thanks to this, you can find everything you can imagine here. Sunwoo has put on his armor and is inspecting it. The man standing next to him says that this protective gear is made of titanium. It will provide guaranteed protection against E-class monsters. Junmo asks what he thinks about it. Sunwoo keeps checking out this armor and says it's comfortable enough. It's also quite light, and he likes it. He picks up his knife, which is attached to his belt, and thinks about the weapon. He examines this knife and says that he will be mastering guns, so it seems that this will be enough. He puts the knife back and asks if he can give him 2 more sets of weapons and armor. The seller agrees to this with a happy expression on his face. After a short period of time, Sunwoo takes one of the kits that was placed in the briefcase. Junmo walks next to him with the second case and asks, he said that he also needs skills, right? Sang-woo agrees with what he said about it. Junmo asks, he's looking for a familiar skill, isn't he? Sang-woo agrees and says that although he's not sure what it is, he's not sure what it is. Junmo points to one of the stores and says they can search for it here. He agrees to this, and in this store, there is a ball on a stand behind the protective glass. They are both looking at the display cases with items that are in this store. Sang-woo has found the item he needs and says with a happy expression that he has found what he needs. Next to this sphere is written the name of the skill familiar. Description allows the hunter to share their senses and vision with the creature and pets they have summoned. The cost is 129,890,000 won. Because of such a large price, Sang-woo was very upset and covered his face with his hand, while his body was shaking because of such a large amount. He called his agent and says he feels it's time to take their relationship to the next level. Junmo asks, does he want an advance? Sunwoo agrees to this. He looks at the screen of his phone, agrees to it, and says that he's not sure if it's enough for him, but it seems like he can lend him 50 million won right now. Sang-woo thanked him and says that he thinks he can handle the rest of the money. He looks at the familiar skill, orb, and says he doesn't have to worry about it. He looks at his reflection in the sphere and says that if everything goes according to his plan, they will be able to recoup this investment very quickly. After some time at home, Sunwoo looks at the skill sphere and the rest of the items that he put on the floor. He has picked up a piece of paper and wants to see what it says. He reads and says that he needs to pour mana into the skill ball. For users who can't control mana, turn on the orb while keeping it in contact with the body. He looks at the small object in his hand and asks, is this the power button? Sang-woo slowly puts his hand on the ball and realizes that he can't control mana. The hand that he placed on the ball started to tremble and he stared at it in silence for a while. He steeled himself and pressed a button on the small remote. This ball starts to emit a very bright light and he has closed his eyes and is very afraid. This light becomes even brighter and blinds him greatly. The system notifies that the familiar skill has been created. Information about the active skill, the familiar, shares feelings with the selected subject. Sang-woo is sitting on the floor and looking at his body, while steam is flying around him after using the skill ball. He looks around and says that the skill ball is gone. He clenches his hands into fists and thinks that the good thing is that the skill is now ready for use. He starts to get up and says that number 1 and number 2 should come to him. After a while, both of his clones have returned home and are standing in front of him. They're both wearing the new armor that Sang-woo bought recently, and he says it's wonderful. He says with a happy expression on his face that they can leave. Some time ago, he says that as he said earlier, he has an idea of how to get stronger even faster. What does he think about the results of the hunt? Junmo asks, does he wonder what he thinks? Of course, everything went great. He hadn't expected such a good result. Sangwoo agrees with him and says that he didn't expect this either. Stamina, strength, agility. Clones have only half of its capabilities, but one of them killed more than 300 rabbits. Even what happened recently, he ordered the clone to get hit and suffer the most dramatic damage from it. It is not so easy to perfectly calculate the time and fearlessly put your face under the fist. It seems like he could beat this freak if he wanted to. Junmo says that it turns out that despite the low rates, they are able to control it better. Sangwoo gives a thumbs up and says that's exactly how he feels. He will use this as his advantage? Junmo asks, how exactly does he want to do it? Sangwoo says they need to visit two places first, training grounds, where he will learn ranged and melee attacks using weapons. Sometime later, in two different training halls. Sometime later, a man with a wooden stick in his hand greets and asks, did he come to register? At the same time, another man asks, did he come to the plate shooting? Will he prepare everything now? Two clones in their armor stand in front of these men to train in these halls. Sunwoo says that of course, he will train the clones to find out their limits. Both coaches ask at the same time, does he want to start sparring right away? Does he want a gun? After that, the man who is engaged in stick fighting says that like this, you need to attack your hands so that the opponent drops the stick. He may be a hunter, but does he really want to fight right away? Is he sure about this? Another coach asks, does he know what symbol shooting is? There's probably a reason why he chose the gun, but is he sure about it? Both clones simultaneously agree and say that they are sure of it. The first clone took to sticks in his hands, and the trainer says that he should prepare. The second clone took the gun, and the trainer says that this is a real gun, not a toy for practice. He holds the remote in his hand and says that in that case they can start. Another coach stands between two sparring partners and tells them to be careful, they can start. The opponent of the first clone immediately charges and swings his arm to attack. The second clone looks at the plate, which is flying up at high speed. The first clone strikes hard and fast with a stick and knocks the weapon out of his opponent's hand. At the same time, the second clone destroys the first plate in the air with a pistol shot. Both trainers were surprised how the two clones had just done. These two clones hold their weapons and look at their opponent and the shooting practice area a while ago before he bought the skill ball and sent the clones to train. Sunwoo says that next he needs the familiar skill. Junmo was surprised by this and asks, does he want to get the familiar skill? Isn't this a vision sharing skill with a pet? What will you do about it? Sangwoo says it's not just for that. This skill also conveys feelings. It is important that all the senses, including the sense of smell and touch, will be combined. Sometime later, Sangwoo stands under the bridge and says that he should imagine that he will use this skill while his clones are training in battle or shooting. He closes his eyes and exhales, trying to focus on it. Sunwoo thought about activating his skill to activate this. At the same time, a strong energy began to surround his body. He thinks he can experience everything. At the same time, his consciousness connects to the first clone, who is currently fighting with sticks. His sparring partner, who swung his arm, runs at him very quickly. Sunwoo sees it through the eyes of a clone and thinks that he needs to know the distance during sparring. The clone dodges his opponent's punch and thinks that he needs an angle at which the joints are located and the balance of the body, while the clone is bending down to avoid the blow and at the same time swings his stick. He immediately throws a sharp punch, and Sangwoo thinks he needs every muscle to move and a flow of power. He also watches the second clone and thinks that he needs to study breathing while shooting. The clone is aiming, and it thinks that it should also learn about aiming and looking direction. The clone fires his gun, and an empty shell casing flies out of it. His bullet hits the symbol, which quickly hits the symbol, and Sangwoo thinks he needs to learn the recoil of the gun and everything else. There is a strong flow of energy coming from his body, and he thinks that all the movements of his clones are done in one go. He slowly opens his eyes and thinks that he can have it all. Sangwoo looks down at his hand after what he just saw from his spears. He smiles a little and thinks about the experience he just got. He remembers what just happened to the clones and thinks about the air pressure when a stick flies by, the smell of gunpowder, and the recoil force after the shot. And he still feels tired from it. But of course, he didn't move a muscle. The clones did all the work for him, and he just shared the experience with them because he has experienced the movements of clones that have the same body as him. It seems as if he could imitate those movements right now. He pays attention to the system window that has appeared in front of him, and it says that his strength and reaction speed have increased. Sang-woo looks at it with a smile and says it's great. Today he will try sparring and shooting, should he contact number 1 first. In the meantime, he needs to concentrate. He closes his eyes again and activates the familiar skill. From his body, energy begins to radiate again, which is directed to the clones. He is transferred to the training room, where the first clone was engaged in sparring using 2 sticks. Number 1 holds 2 sticks in his hands and looks at the coach who admitted him to this gym. He looks at the serious expression on the coach's face as he stands in front of him in a fighting stance. Sunwoo looks at it through the clone and thinks that this man looks pretty strong. People who were engaged in this hall were surprised when they noticed and asked, "What is happening? Is the coach going to spar with this guy on his own?" Well, since Song looked high and lost, that's understandable. The trainer and the clone waved their sticks to indicate that they were ready to start sparring. They simultaneously strike very fast blows with their sticks and repel each other's attacks. The trainer strikes with both sticks from top to bottom, but the clone successfully blocks this attack. The coach keeps throwing punches and thinks that there is no experience in his attacks. It looked like he wasn't used to the sticks yet. The clone quickly dodged his attack, and he thinks that however his defense is, it's a different matter altogether. Could he really predict his movements? He perfectly dodges its attacks. The trainer raises his hand in a sharp movement to deliver a strong blow. He strikes with great force with one hand, but the clone blocks this blow with both of his sticks. He holds back his attack, making his hand shake, but he doesn't lose eye contact with his opponent. He made an effort and pushed the coach away, which surprised him greatly. The clone moves from defense to attack and strikes hard with its weapon. He continues to put pressure on the coach, and this surprised him a lot. Does he wonder what it was? This attack was quite strong. He was immediately able to copy his fighting style. The coach continues to contain the pressure that the clone puts on him and is going to do something. He strikes very hard with one hand, but the clone steps back to avoid the blow. The fact that he was able to dodge the coach's attack greatly surprised those who watched this sparring. The clone rushes into the attack, pulling his arm back in advance in order to deliver a stabbing blow with a stick. This surprised the coach very much, and he was unable to block the kick that hit his shoulder. The trainer was pinned against the wall, and steam was coming from the place where the clone hit. He turns around and is surprised to find himself pinned against the wall. The clone has jumped up and is already swinging his stick to deliver another downward slash. The coach starts moving very fast, and a smile appears on his face. He dodged the clone's attack by running along the wall and jumped back to get a better position. Sanwoo, as well as the clone, were very much surprised by this move and looked at it in surprise. Coach lands next to him and knocks the stick out of number 1's hand with a very strong kick. His face was very serious the moment he did this, and the stick he just knocked out flies past his face. The guy who looks at this sparring session says that their coach is also not so simple. The other guy applauds and says that it was still very close. Sang-woo feels the same pain that the clone feels, and the very intense pain in his wrist caused him to start crying. The coach gets to his feet after this attack and says that it was quite dangerous. He holds out his hand with his stick and asks if he wants to continue. The clone looks at him and is silent for a while. Sunwoo looks at the clone and mentally asks number 1 if he's okay. The clone doesn't respond to him and moves very quickly, intending to do something. He repeats the movement of the coach, which surprised him very much, and runs along the wall, after which he bounces off. The guys who were watching were shocked by what he just did. The coach is just as surprised as the students are at what he's doing. The clone flies by the coach's side and surprised by this. Sanwoo mentally asks, so does he want to continue? The clone lands in front of the surprised trainer. Number 1 took the stick out of the coach's hand and politely asks for another sparring session. The coach smiled slightly at this and agreed to have another sparring session with him. Sang-woo sighed calmly and thinks that now he wants to test clone number 2. Due to the fact that he is moving to another clone, energy is radiating from number 1. Some time later, someone shot and hit a plate that was in the air. The guy with a very satisfied expression loads the shotgun, laughs and asks the girl if he saw it. Impressed by this, the girl who was standing next to him agrees and says that he was very cool. Sang-woo is confused by what he heard and thinks that he won't do anything. He looks at the clone and thinks that number 2 is even shooting at the targets of the person behind him. It doesn't really matter. He needs to concentrate on shooting. They seem to be happy. The guy next to him laughs and asks her to let him try again. What happens if he gets the highest score? The clone looks at the plate, which is flying very fast in front of him. The clone aims his gun at the plate, and Sangwoo thinks he needs to fix his upper body position. He looks through the eyes of a clone at how he aims, and thinks that it is necessary not to move to turn only in the direction of movement, following the trajectory of the saucer. Then, when the target and the intended trajectory converge, the clone fires a pistol and hits this saucer, which was flying fast. Sangwoo keeps looking at it and thinks that he needs to memorize it. The clone keeps looking at this plate and he thinks that he needs to memorize every detail. He must learn everything his clones can do. Sometime later, the flow of energy returns to the body of Sunwoo, who is standing in the same place. He slowly opens his eyes and looks at something in front of him. That switching between the first and second clone tires him out. He became very ill. His consciousness became blurry, and he looks at his hand with incomprehension. Sanwoo covers his face with one hand and leans on the box next to him with the other, thinking that his mana has run out and he feels tired. He needs to rest. He sits down on a bench to rest and looks out at the street. Sunwoo thinks that the clones' movements are just crazy. They do not doubt at all and are not afraid of anything, so they move as they need to. He could feel the wind as the clone dodged the stick. Next time, he would go with them. He had to see what would happen if he tried it himself. Someone is walking down the road next to the bench that Sangwoo is currently sitting on. This person turns out to be Hae-young, and she notices him sitting on a bench. She calls him teacher. It surprised him, and he pays attention to her. He looks at her and calls her name. He asks her what she's doing here so late. Hae-young says she studied at the library. Sangwoo smiles and says she should look at herself. She's cheating, and she's not even ashamed. She is angry about this and says that she is not actually lying and that she has already finished her homework. The man sitting next to them is smoking a cigarette, smiling and about to say something. He asks the man who recently tried to cheat Sangwoo, the one he was talking about, isn't that him? Some time ago, Hee-sung asked on the phone, does that mean he just let Kongjun-mo go? The man apologizes and says that he wanted to scare him a little, but it turned out that their conversation was recorded. Hee-sung is very surprised by this and asks, what did he say? Was his threats recorded? The man begins to worrying very much about what is happening and says that he will find out everything. Hee-sung says he can forget about it. He should not say anything and just shut up. In addition, he should not go near the territory of Yu-jungsan. Even if something happens, it has nothing to do with his guild. Okay. He's just a street bully. After he said that, he ended the call, and the man became very angry about what had happened. He throws his phone very hard into a bridge pillar out of extreme anger. He starts kicking his phone very hard and swears loudly. He keeps hitting the phone and asks if he even knows who he's dealing with. Someone comes up to him and asks him what happened again. Why is he angry again? The man has stopped, is breathing heavily, and is looking at the person who said that. Two men approached him, and one of them, with a big smile, says that they have not met him for a long time. The man recognized them and named one of them Yunziak. He continues to smile broadly and asks, what's your emergency? Some time later, the three of them smoked one cigarette each and left the trash on the ground. Yunziak laughs and asks why he didn't do anything, just letting him go. He knew this would happen when he was excited to join the first guild in the country. The man stands next to him and apologizes to him. Do they have any work for him? The guild told him not to go near Yuzhen territory. Junziak says, it's amazing that he got straight to the point. He asks Chongwon if they have anything. The guy with the long hair answered to his name and says that they will find a part-time job. The man is about to say something when he notices Sangwoo sitting on a bench not far from them and stops. He stares at him intently as he talks to Hae-young. He points his finger at it and says he did it. He's the one who recorded it on video. Junseek looks where he's pointing and asks, is he sure about this? The man is very angry, goes in his direction, and says that he is absolutely sure of this. Junseek keeps smiling and says he should calm down. The man came closer, hid behind a pillar, and watched Sangwoo. The veins on his face are very prominent due to anger, and his body is trembling. Junseek walks up to him, looks in the same direction as him, and asks if the guy he's talking about is him. Heng asks the teacher what he's doing here. Sangwoo says he's just training here. Someone walks towards them and calls out loudly, which immediately catches their attention, and says that he heard that his brother owed him something. He and 3 other men walk towards him together and smile as they watch them. Hae-young asks the teacher, "Who are these people?" Sang-woo looks at them and says that he doesn't know them at all. He notices a very angry man walking next to them. He understood what was happening and mentally called out for number 1 and number 2. He walks closer to them and asks how he can help them. The man was even more angry at this question and his face turned very red. He asks very loudly, as if he doesn't know it himself. Yoon-seak continues to smile broadly, stopping him and telling him that he should wait a bit. He approaches Sang-woo and says that he has heard that he has a video of his brother making a mistake because of his emotions. Is that true? He should delete this video and then they will go their separate ways peacefully. Sang-woo takes out his phone and asks, are they saying they'll let him go if he deletes that video? The man is outraged that he's just going to let go and wants to say something, but Yoon-seak doesn't listen to him and says he's right. He doesn't like doing tedious work either. Sang-woo starts to take his phone hand back and is about to say something. He asks if there is any guarantee that they will actually do so. Yoon-seak smiles, runs his fingers over his lips, and is about to say something about this guy. He gives me a big, sly smile and says that he wasn't so stupid after all. He's right that he won't leave here without a beating. But he wasn't smart enough to delete the video as soon as he took it. So what's the difference? Sang-woo quietly says that as soon as she gets the chance, she should run away from here. While the men warm up, he says that there is actually a difference. He didn't think that he would find himself in a predicament so soon. He has taken a fighting stance and says the difference is that he will beat them all. Points his finger at him and says he's very cocky. He stands still and says they should give him a good beating. Chong-won runs forward with the man who swung his fist and loudly says that he will beg him to let him delete that video. He throws a punch, but Sang-woo manages to dodge the attack. Chong-won also throws a punch with his hand and hits him on the head. The man kicks him and hits him on the body. Sun-woo has moved back a bit because of this and is trying to recover from these blows. Chong-won throws another punch with his hand and hits him on the head. Hang is very worried about what is happening and calls out loudly for his teacher. Sang-woo fell to the ground and slid a few meters on the ground. Blood is pouring out of his mouth as he tries to get up and thinks he didn't make it the first time. He struggles to get up and Hang stands between him and the 3 men and stares at him. She creates a small ball of her energy next to her hand. This ball starts to slowly grow larger, and she says that they should all move back. Sang-woo slowly stands up and calls her name. He was surprised when he noticed something that caught his attention. He can see Hae-young shaking because of his intense fear of them. The man was surprised when he saw what she did and asks, is she really an awakened one? Joon-seek hits the 2 of them in one blow and asks these idiots, are they really scared of schoolgirls? He notices the slight look of fright on Hae-young's face and asks what will happen if they don't back down. He smiles and asks what she will do if they keep coming. Han points this ball of energy at them and tells them that she said they should leave. Yoon-seak doesn't listen to her and keeps walking towards her despite her warnings. Han is very worried, gritting her teeth because of the tension, and is about to say something to him. She closed her eyes, screamed, and released that ball of energy at him. Yoon-seak looks at this energy ball that's flying at him and isn't going to do anything. This ball hits it, and a large cloud of steam rises from it. The other 2 men who were standing behind him were surprised by this, covering their hands from the white caused by the explosion of the balloon and loudly calling out to their brother. They are looking at a large cloud of steam that is rising up and dissipating. Yoon-seak resisted this attack and says with a big smile that first of all, there are as many awakened people as there are stones on the road. This ball that Hang released only tore through his clothes, but there's no damage left on his body, and he says that's why there's nothing to brag about. He is going to hit her with his palm and says she should grow up by now. He throws a very strong punch, but in time, Sun-woo came up and was able to block it and protect her. He glares at him and tells the freak that it's not over yet. In response, he punches him very hard in the face. Joon-seak was surprised because of this punch, and because of this, he relaxed his arm. Hae-young was very surprised at what had just happened and looked at it with her mouth hanging open. Sang-woo stares at his opponent with an angry expression after that punch. Yoon-seak clutched his face and moved back to the other men because of the impact. The man runs towards him, swinging his fist and calling him a freak. Sunwoo stares at him and thinks that he's starting to realize that it's not enough to copy the clone's movements. He dodges his punch and thinks that besides, the punch isn't just about swinging his arms. He begins to have better control of his body from the legs to the waist, and from the waist to the arm. After thinking about this, Sangwoo swings his fist and is about to throw a punch. He delivers a very strong blow to the head of the man who just tried to hit him. At the same time, Changwon jumps up and looks angry as he's about to throw a punch. Sangwoo notices him and realizes that he can't avoid it. He will definitely hit him. So he decides to strike at the same time as him, and they both hit each other. There were bruises on his face from the impact, but Changwon couldn't take it anymore and fell to the ground. Sangwoo looks at him and breathes heavily because he's a little tired. Jun-seek runs a finger across his lips and asks, "So he can fight, right?" He smiles very maliciously, his eyes light up with anger, and he speaks that he wasn't sure whether to hit someone who couldn't even swing his fists. Sangwoo is watching him closely, but his hands are shaking, and he thinks he still feels the pain from the last fight. The moment he attacked Hang, he was able to hold out, but if he's that strong, did he have a skill related to strengthening muscle strength? He continues to stand in a fighting stance with his hands shaking, and thinks that he can't let it hit him. Jun-seek quickly runs towards him with a very wide smile and warns him of his approach. Sangwoo dodges his punch and immediately punches him back in the face. He doesn't stop there and immediately lands another punch to his face. Yoon-seak was surprised by such a strong blow to the head and calls him a small freak. He starts running quickly towards him and is about to grab him with his huge hands. Sangwoo successfully evades his grip, hits him on the head, and thinks that he needs to hit him properly and knock him out. Yoon-seak lands a roundhouse kick and loudly calls him a freak, but Sangwoo anticipated this and ducked to avoid the attack. He lifts himself back up and lands a very hard blow on the head. Changwon tries to get up even though his body is shaking from the pain and tries to call out to his brother. Sangwoo was very surprised by what he saw after the punch he landed. Jun-seok's eyes were burning brightly due to rage, and lines of bright light were starting to spread across his body. The same line spread across his arm, which he pulled back to strike. As he prepared to strike, he smiled broadly and says that he is now a corpse. Sangwoo calmly looks at him and thinks that this is a good swing. He needs to dodge this attack. Suddenly, someone who was lying on the ground grabbed his leg to make it difficult for him to move. He is very surprised by this, lowers his head down, and sees a man holding his leg with an evil expression on his face. He turns back around and Yoon-seok has already grabbed his shoulder and is about to throw a punch with his other hand. He lets go of his shoulder. At the same time, he lands a very hard blow on his stomach. Sunwoo's mouth opened wide at the impact, and he coughed loudly. Hae-young was shocked when she saw this. She is very worried about it and calls out loudly for him. Sunwoo was thrown back several meters and hit his back against a pillar. He's down on one knee, groaning in pain, and thinks it's really hard for him to breathe. Sanwoo holds onto the spot where he was just hit and thinks he needs to breathe. While he is trying to do this, he is staring intently at what is happening in front of him. He sees Yoon-seok about to throw another hard punch at him and thinks this is the end. Suddenly, Hang released another ball of energy and hit it to interrupt the strike. This time, she managed to injure him. Yoon-seok felt a lot of pain, stopped his attack, and coughed. Sangwoo was very surprised to be saved and looks at what happened. Ha-young has injured her arm from releasing such a strong energy ball and is glaring at them angrily. Changwon and the man come to their senses, start to get up, and are very angry about what she just did. They run to attack her and say that it would be better for her if she ran away. Both of them do not have time to reach it due to the fact that at the same moment two clones came here and stopped them with their punches. Han looks in surprise at the clone, who just stood up for her. She also looked at the second clone that had attacked the other man. Yoon-seok is surprised to see what happened and asks, "What was it?" Sangwoo shouted to get his attention, and he turned around at his voice. He wiped the blood from his face and spoke with a smile that he could finally breathe. Yoon-seok gets very angry about this, runs to him, swings his fist, and calls him a freak. Sangwoo looks at him with a calm expression and smiles. He dodged Jun-seek's punch with a move he learned from the clone, ran along the pillar, and jumped back. Sangwoo looks at his angry face and says with a smile that he is grateful for the practical test. After that, he turned around in the air and kicked Junseek's head very hard and knocked him down. After this fight, Sangwoo sat down on the ground and breathed heavily to rest and recover his strength. Yoonseak is lying on the ground unconscious, and several of his teeth were knocked out after the last blow. The other two bandits who were defeated by the clones are also lying on the ground unconscious. The system notifies that muscle strength has been gained, speed, endurance, and stamina have been increased. Clone skill increase. The active skill is third-level cloning. Creates a clone that looks like the user, using energy. The maximum number of clones depends on the user's level. The number of clones available to summon at a time is 3, cooldown time, and you can summon a clone. Skills: active skill third-level cloning and familiar. Passive skills strengthen third-level clones. Sangwoo looks at this with a bruised face and laughs a little. When he finished reading this, he immediately started to fall on his back. He lies down on the grass and says this is what he got. Concerned about this, the clones immediately run towards him and Hae-young runs after them and calls for the teacher. Sometime later in the evening, Sangwoo looks at her bandaged hand and asks why didn't she run away when she had time. Hae-young turns to him and says that she doesn't think that's what he meant. Sunwoo understood her and says she's right. However, it was dangerous. Hae-young says she was really surprised. She still can't believe that the famous novice hunter was his clone. She recalls that a while ago, she recognized his clone and asked, "Isn't that Hawkeye from Ojingson?" Sangwoo coughs and asks her not to tell anyone about this. Han is surprised by this and asks why he doesn't want this. He doesn't want fame. Sangwoo says it might happen again. It's also dangerous. Han turns to him and says that she understands him. She keep her mouth shut. Sunwoo asks, this is her house, right? She agrees, but it upset her, and she wonders if he's already there. He asks if her arm is okay. Can she hold a pen? Hae-young winks at him and says that only her left arm is injured, so it's fine. She looks away a little sheepishly and asks, however, since his student was hurt, why don't they lower the amount of homework? Sunwoo asks, but didn't she finish everything in the study room? Hae-young is a little upset about this and says that he only has a good memory for this kind of thing. Sangwoo called her name and thanked her, which surprised and confused her a lot. He looks at her and says that it seems he was only able to win because she held him back. Han agrees with him with a confused but smug expression and says that she played an important role today. In general, simple gratitude is not enough. He would really thank her when they ate the meat. Sunwoo realizes that he has no other choice, agrees, and says that he will buy some meat. Han gets excited when she hears this and says it's great. He promised her. She goes to the entrance of the building and says she has to go. Sangwoo smiles slightly and says that he will do anything to feed her meat. He leaves in high spirits and the clones follow him. He stopped and was embarrassed when he realized they were following him. He turns and asks why they're following him. They need to work hard. The clones simultaneously say that it's getting late, so all the training centers are closed. He gave two sticks to the clones and says they can train in the park. The clones look at these sticks with their mouths open in surprise. After 1 month, Junlo called Sangwoo from his office and greeted him. He asks how his plan is being implemented. Sangwoo says that everything is going very well. He sits in his room with the clones and says that now he can even shoot saucers. In addition, his cloning skill level had increased, so he now had a third clone. John Will congratulates him on this and says that now he can learn even faster. Sunwoo agrees with him about this. In his stats window, it says that his strength has improved to 1. 432 points, reflexes 1, to 118 points, health points 1024, stamina's at 894 points, mana's at 930 SE. He wonders if the average E-class performance score is 14 right. He says it's a little unexpected, though. Will it be possible to request 3 F-class hunting territories for tomorrow? Junmo is surprised by this and asks, does he need 3 territories? Sunwoo asks, will it be difficult to do this? Junmo says that's not the case, so it's possible that he can Han. Who does he think he is? He was going to get it, no matter what. Sangwoo laughs and says he can be counted on. Junmo writes everything down in a notebook and asks, how long does he need it? Sangwoo says that he will send the clones to train in the morning and then go to the hunting grounds in the afternoon. Junmo says he understood him. In that case, they will meet tomorrow. Sangwoo wishes him a good night and ends the call. He turns off his phone, turns to the clones, and says he has other ideas for today. He points to each clone and says that he should do upper body, he should do lower body, and he should do cardio. They must go to the park now and be back before 12 o'clock. The clones obeyed him and immediately ran for the exit. Sangwoo was angry with them and loudly says that they should leave their weapons at home. The clones were very confused about this. Some time later, he searches the internet for a monster hunting plan. The first video with the title guide for beginners, Part 1, The Behavior of Dog-like Monsters. Sunwoo looks at this and thinks he can see from the training of the clones that they are learning well. They are capable of copying and reproducing virtually any movement, provided that it is physically possible. Then what happens if he learns all the monsters and how to properly hunt them? He turns on the first video, and the author greets the audience and says that today he will explain to them the behavior of monsters that look like dogs. He continues to watch a lot of videos from different authors, which say that he should assess the situation. You need to choose the right weapon for beginners. You can easily get some materials. Sunwoo thinks that if he learns all this, then the clones will also be able to use this knowledge. After a while, when the day came, clones come home after a long training session and slowly walk to their room. Sangwoo notices them with a very tired look and asks, "Is it really 12 o'clock?" He looks at them and thinks they are full of energy. "We weren't tired at all, even though we worked all day." He says they should take a shower and go eat. He thinks giant rats, alien fish, horned rabbits, and so on. He looked at the guides for most of the F-class monsters. Now he needs to check if they can follow these instructions. He will monitor and gain experience hunting with the familiar skill. And during the break, he will study mana. It won't be able to maintain it for long. Sangwoo notices that Junmo texted him that he will be arriving in 10 minutes and says that an agent will be coming to see him soon. If they finished eating, they should get ready. The clones who had just sat down to eat were very surprised by what he said. Some time later, Sangwoo goes outside with the clones and greets his agent. Junmo notices him and greets him back. He looks at the clones and says they become quite intimidating. Sangwoo agrees with him and says that even he is uncomfortable around them. Are the territories he asked for ready? Junmo says that of course it is. He booked 3 seats not far from each other. While the clones get in the car, and Sangwoo stands next to them and says that it's great. He has to take care of the boys. Junmo is surprised to find him standing still and asking, isn't he going to go? And he needs to train his mana breathing technique. He should just bring them to the territory for hunting and let them know if they got there well. Junmo says that if he wants it that way, then it's fine. After that, he leaves with the clones in the territory for hunting. Sangwoo looks at the car with them leaving and asks, is it his turn now? He returns home and watches a video where the melody plays, and the author says that you need to take a slow breath. You need to relax your body and concentrate on your feelings. You should ignore the sounds and focus on yourself. It's also useful to remember how you feel when using the skill. Sunwoo thinks about it. How does he feel when using the skill? That's right, when using familiar or clone skills, it feels like energy is being released from its body. The author says that it is necessary to inhale for 10 seconds and imagine how mana circulates in the body. Sangwoo closes his eyes and imagines the energy he felt that time circulating in his body after some time that he spent meditating with the use of energy. He felt something strange happening in his body. Within his body, many strands of energy have appeared that radiate from the middle of his body. Sangwoo opens his eyes and is surprised to see something in front of him. The system notifies that he has received a meditation skill. Active skill, first level meditation, thoughts that stabilize the mind. Slightly restores mental fatigue. Slightly increases the rate of mana growth. Slightly increases the rate of mana recovery. Increases the effect of mana respiration. At the same time, somewhere in an unknown place on the ground, there were many dead people and huge fish that were fighting against each other. One person who survived crawls away and says that this can't be happening. What is this monster doing here? He continues to crawl away with tears in his eyes and says that this is an F-class dungeon after all. They just came to hunt an alien fish. This monster shouldn't be here. A large monster at this time eats the body of a dead alien fish. This monster pays attention to a guy who is trying to escape and says that he needs to report it to the authorities. This big monster picked up a sword that he found in this field. The guy notices something and asks what's going on here. In the reflection on his vambrace, he spots a monster heading towards him. This monster came closer to him and put a sword to his head, which scared the guy very much. He screams loudly in fear, and the monster mercilessly kills him. Some time later, Junmo arrived in his car and pulled over. He gets out of the car and says this is the last hunting ground. This is called sewage treatment plants. He says an alien fish lives here. They have strong jaws. The clone who gets out of the car and says he understood him. Junmo says he should be careful. The clone closes the car door and looks back at the place they arrived at. Junmo looks at the screen and thinks that he should send a message now that he has delivered all 3 of them. He wrote that all 3 clones were delivered to the sites. He thinks that one hunter in 3 different places. He really has an incredible ability. However, he is still sitting in his room. Junmo looks at the clone walking into the building for a hunt and thinks that depending on the results of this hunt, there might be an uproar in the hunter industry. At the same time, Sanwoo is in his room meditating and asks, has he already obtained the mana breath skill? He's a real genius. The author of the video that he is watching says that you need to feel the mana and continue to breathe. You can't let the resulting meditation and mana breathing skills confuse you. Sanwoo felt sad that this wasn't the right thing to do. He scratches his head and says that apparently, getting the right skill is not so easy. It looked like he shouldn't have been happy about it. He remembers the clones and thinks that all the clones must have made it to their places. At the same time, he received a message from Junmoo, saying that all 3 clones were delivered to the sites. Sunwoo says it's great, so it's time to visit the hunting grounds. He closes his eyes and energy begins to flow out of his body, which is directed to one of the clones. The system notifies that a familiar skill has been activated. The clone plunges his weapon into the head of a large rat. Sunwoo, who has just moved into this clone's body, is very surprised by this and asks, what's going on here? He looked around and realized that number 1 was just hunting. He doesn't seem to have any problems. Did the guide really help to cope with this? The clone has heard a sound and turns around at the sound. He notices that a huge number of rats are coming at him from a dark cave, one of which he has just defeated. Sunwoo looks at this crowd of rats and thinks that from the looks of it, he will soon find out about the usefulness of the guides. He recalls that the author of one of the guides in his video said that giant rats are the most annoying F-class monsters. So if a person is going to hunt them, he suggests to get together in a group. But if a solo raid is unavoidable, then there are other ways to deal with them. First, because they run straight, you just need to keep your distance and shoot at them. Clone number 1 fires multiple shots from his gun at the rats that are running towards him. The man in the video says that if a person can't kill everyone with shots and everything goes into melee, you need to remember that their skulls are strong. So you need to aim at the spine. The clone does everything exactly as they said in the guides and fights against the remaining rats. The author of the guide says that, however, of course, these monsters, like any rats, multiply quickly. If a person has a good hand, it will become a very simple source of experience points. A man who passes next to him asks, does he really think it's so easy to get hit by a moving object? The man who shot this guide says that he should not spoil his video. The man says that he always says that these monsters are just an easy source of experience. Currently, the clone is quickly reloading his gun, looking at how many rats are running towards him. He fires shots and empty shell casings fly out of his weapon. With his shots, he hits exactly in the spine of the rats that are approaching him. Some time later, Sunwoo observes the second clone and thinks that as expected, the clones can hunt just like him using his techniques. Suddenly something starts crawling out of the ground with very loud sounds. It turned out to be a huge scorpion, and Sunwoo thinks that they can't be scared or caught off guard. However, they hunt without paying attention to the level of the enemy. The clone quickly reacted to the appearance of this monster and destroyed the scorpion's tail with a shot from its pistol. He puts his foot on the monster's head and takes a few more shots to the head. He strikes very hard with his dagger, and Sanwoo thinks that he can also try out their experience with the familiar skill. He gets a lot of messages from the system saying that all his stats are being upgraded. The third clone is also fighting an alien fish at the same time. And Sunwoo thinks that as his stats increase, the clones will also become stronger. Today, he will get everything from the F-class monster fields. Some time later, someone is slowly walking through a dungeon where one of the clones has already been. One of the guys looks around apprehensively and asks why it's so quiet here today. The second guy says he doesn't know that. They should have met at least a few monsters by now. They spot the body of a large rat in a dark cave and one of them asks what it is. They come closer, light the cave with a flashlight, and one of the guys says that it's full of corpses. How much do they cost? They should pack it all up in a box as soon as possible. After a while, somewhere in the woods, Sunwoo looks after the clone who fought the alien fish and thinks that the hunt is going well. However, why does he feel like he's missing something? He realized why he was feeling this way, and it shocked him very much. He realized that they hadn't collected a single body, and that was money. Sunwoo mentally orders all the clones to go back and collect all the corpses of the monsters they killed. They should not resume hunting until they have collected them all in a box. However, what if someone had already collected the bodies of the monsters they had killed? He looks away and notices something that catches his attention. Sunwoo points out the bodies of the alien fish to number 3 and asks why he doesn't collect these corpses. The clone says he didn't hunt them. He is very angry because of his answer and says that every corpse is money. This wasn't the time to pretend he was a saint. The clone reluctantly agrees and says that he will collect it. He walks up to the very badly cut bodies of the alien fish and looks at it. Sunwoo also looks at it and wonders if it wasn't number 3 who killed them, then who cut them up like that? The clone finds something strange in the body of one of these alien fish. He took something out and says that it is not an alien fish. Does he have to take this too? Sunwoo was very surprised when he noticed what he had taken out of the monster's body. The object turned out to be the severed arm of one of the hunters who had been there before him. Something runs very fast in the forest, not far from the clone, and he notices it. The clone pulls out his gun, looks around, and Sunwoo knows there's something here. The clone walks through this forest and hears loud noises that are heard near him. A loud sound that came from the side of him caught his attention. He turns around, pointing his gun in that direction, and notices that it was the severed head of an alien fish. He's embarrassed about it and wonders if it was really bait. At this moment, a huge monster with sharp teeth that looked like a fish was standing behind him. The clone sensed the presence of this monster and abruptly turned around to start shooting. As soon as he turned around, his arm was cut off by this huge monster at a terrifying speed, and it shocked him very much. The clone started to have a lot of thoughts about how fast this monster was. He feels very hot. What just happened? He's in a lot of pain. He grits his teeth hard because of the pain and realizes that his right arm has been severed. Sunwoo felt the pain of this clone due to using the skill and screamed very loudly. He abruptly stopped using his skill. And once inside his house, he began to breathe heavily, trying to recover from what had happened. He immediately looks at his trembling right hand and feels a very strong fear because of it. He keeps looking at his hand and is breathing very hard because of what he just experienced. He hugs his knees and shakes from the very strong shock he just experienced. He's calmed down a bit and thinks that the connection was broken without warning due to the pain. Sunwoo takes out her phone and says that now is not the time for this. He makes a call, and Junmo answers it and asks what happened. Sunwoo asks the agent which hunting ground he brought number 3 to. Junmo wonders what's wrong with his voice. He says it's a sewage treatment plant in Yechang. What's wrong? Sunwoo puts on his shoes and says that he should bring numbers 1 and 2 there immediately. And he'll be there soon, too. He will explain everything to him on the spot. Junmo agrees and says he's on his way. But what happened? Is there a problem with hunting? Sunwoo, with a very serious expression, says that there really is a problem, and it's huge. Clone number 3, who recently lost an arm, holds a knife in his left hand and stares at the monster that stands in front of him. He fell to his knees in front of the monster that holds the sword of one of the hunters in its hand. The clone's body begins to slowly disappear, and the pupils in its eyes are gone. His body completely disappeared, and only the equipment he was wearing remained on the ground in front of the monster. At the same time, Sunwoo gets out of the car and closes the door behind him. The taxi car that just brought him leaves immediately afterwards. He breathes heavily and looks around. Sunwoo sees a well-guarded hunting area. All of a sudden, he felt the connection to number 3 cut off. He looks at the system window in front of him and reads that there is still more than 6 hours to wait before the skill cooldown. He goes to the entrance, is stopped by a security guard, and says that he must show his identification bracelet. The guards checked his wristband, and the second guard says he can get through. Sunwoo thinks he can only hope that the agent is already here. He goes inside and Junmo spots him with 2 clones and calls him Hunter. Sunwoo notices him and says that he is glad that he has already arrived here. Besides, he brought his clones number 1 and 2, and he's very happy about it. Junmo asks, "So what happened there?" Sunwoo says that number 3 has disappeared. There was some other monster on the playground besides the alien fish. It was very strong. Junmo is surprised by this and asks, "What did he say? Was there another monster?" Sunwoo agrees and says that he had the head of a fish, but a body with arms and legs, and is going to say something about it. He says they should alert the authorities and temporarily close the place. This monster is called Fishman, and its rank is D. Even a group of E-class hunters isn't enough to hunt this monster. Sangwoo thinks it over and says that he understood it. He must inform the authorities and block the entrance of other hunters. Junmo agrees, turns around to do it, and says he'll be. He doesn't have time to finish because Sangwoo says that he shouldn't do it right now. He must do this after his clones pass through the portal. Junmo is very surprised by this and turns to him and wants to say something about it. Sangwoo thinks it all over and says they can't just sit and wait. Besides, he wants him to trust him. He wants him to believe him the way he believes his clones. Sangwoo sits down in a meditation position and activates the familiar skill. His consciousness goes to the 2 clones who went to this place. They both walk side by side through a dense forest, with tall grass and bushes. Sangwoo thinks they should go to the place where number 3 disappeared first. The clones go in the right direction and hold a gun in their hands and look around the place. The clone that was walking in front stops and signs that you need to stop. They see a fisherman feeding on alien fish and watch him from hiding in the bushes. Sangwoo thinks that he didn't even know that he would be so lucky. He has the ability to attack first. His stats are equal to E-class, but his clones only have 53 degrees of that. So they're on the verge of F-class. But right now, the monster isn't in its best shape either. If you take into account the hunting abilities of his clones, then this task is feasible. Sunwoo watches this monster from behind the clones back in her mind. He orders the drones to aim for the head. He orders the monster to be killed, and the clones immediately start firing their guns. They hit the fishman's head, but these bullets don't do any damage and just bounce off the monster's head. What just happened surprised the clones very much, and they looked at this monster in shock. Sunwoo was also very surprised by this, and wonders if bullets don't work against him. Raybolda turns around to face the clones and lets out a very loud cry, opening her mouth wide. The monster jumped very high and flies towards the clones, who are standing still and looking at it. The monster strikes hard with its paws in the fall, but the clones manage to jump out of the way and dodge this attack. One of the clones moves his arm back very quickly to strike. He jumps over the monster, spins very fast in the air, and delivers a very strong blow to the monster's neck with his knife. There was only a small wound on the fisherman's neck after such a blow, which didn't even attract his attention, and he wonders if the knife stab only left a scratch. The monster very quickly turns around in the direction of this clone, and immediately strikes with a sword. Looking at its opponent, surprised by what happened, the clone was saved by the tree behind him, which stopped the sword strike from this monster. This clone bounces to the side to increase the distance from the monster, while the second clone fires a pistol at the monster's back. Sangwoo thinks it's a good thing that this monster is big, so it won't be convenient for him to swing his sword in the trees. The monster continues to press down on its sword with great force, and the wood begins to crack. The fisherman continued his strike with great force and was able to cut open this tree where his sword was stuck. Sunwoo was very surprised that the fisherman continued to cut down the trees nearby and thinks that this judgment was wrong. They should forget what he thought earlier. This tree falls to the ground and makes a very loud sound. 2 trees have fallen to the ground next to the monster, which is not paying attention. The clones start running very fast towards this beastman while he is not looking at them. They deal 2 blows to the monster's sword-wielding hand. They stare at the fisherman who is standing in front of them, and Sungwoo knows it's not working. This monster turns to its opponent and pulls the heavily strained arm without a sword back. This monster delivers a very strong and fast blow, causing the clone to be thrown back and crash into a tree. Sunwoo is very surprised by this and wonders how they can hunt this monster if their attacks are so ineffective. The remaining clone looks at the monster in horror, and he remembers what happened with the bullets some time ago. He thinks the first bullet just bounced off the monster's head, but the second one did a little damage. The clone points his gun at the fisherman, and Sunwoo wonders if this is possible. The clone fires its pistol, hitting the same spot that caused the monster to let out a cry of pain. Sangwoo was very happy that his idea worked. While the second clone is trying to recover from the monster's heavy hit, he thinks it's great news. They should feed this fish man lead. The clones dodge the monster's attacks while firing their pistols at the neck area. A lot of shots from the gun force the monster to go on the defensive and cover its head with its hand. The fishman tightens his grip on the sword in his hand, and his blood drips onto the blade of the sword. This blood begins to turn into fire, which engulfs the blade of the sword. The monster's eyes start to turn red due to the blood, and it makes a very loud sound.